Centerville City Council is now in session. We thank you for coming out to join us this evening. We're glad to have you with us as we participate in this exercise in self-government. We apologize for starting just a couple of minutes late. We'll note for the record that all members of the City Council are here and accounted for. I will lead the Pledge of Allegiance, after which we're very pleased to have Lauren Pankratz, who's the pastor at the Bridge Community Church, with us. Lauren is also a member of our Parks and Recs Committee and does a lot of volunteer work around our city, and we really appreciate all that he does for our city. So if you'd join with me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I want to thank you guys for allowing me the privilege of coming before you today and saying a prayer. Would you guys just bow with me in prayer? Father in heaven, we are just so blessed in so many ways and so thankful. God, we're so grateful for this amazing place that we call home. What a beautiful city we live in. What a beautiful terrain that you've given us. God, love seeing the leaves change on the trees, God, as we head into fall, and just seeing the changes. God, what an amazing place to live. God, we are grateful. Thank you, Lord, for our leaders who sacrifice their time and their talents here for our city and for us. God, we know that the job is not always easy, and so we ask, God, for tremendous grace. God, we ask that you would give them an amazing amount of wisdom, that they would lead effectively. God, help them to make decisions, Lord, that will improve the quality of lives for all of us who live here. Lord, we are thankful for the leaders you've appointed at this time, and ask that you would just have your hand upon them and upon this meeting and the decisions they make. We ask this in your name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you very much. We appreciate you coming, and glad to see you bring your boys. The first item on our agenda tonight is the open session, which is an opportunity for any member of the public to comment on any subject of municipal concern, including items that are not on the agenda. I have Mr. Dave Bell, who is asked to speak during this session and address the council for a minute. So we'll open the open session, invite Dave to go first, and then anyone else who would like to speak, we'd invite you to follow Dave, and ask you state your city of residence for the record and full name and keep your comments limited to 2 minutes or so.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for your service. If I could.
Mr. Bell, could you speak directly into the mic? We have a hard time hearing you otherwise.
Hello, good evening. Pull it up. I thank you for your
really
service.
A mic is for shorter people.
Okay. Sorry. And anyway, so thank you for all you do. I mean that. My residence is in Bountiful, and but I still own a couple homes here in Centerville, and of course my business there on the frontage road, Dave's Auto. What I'd like to speak to you about is I'm 27 years I've been in the city now fixing cars. I appreciate that opportunity. It's been pretty good. And, 2 of my sons work for me full-time now. Miles, some of you might know him. He runs the places, and my older boy, Joey, is my machinist, and I have another son coming out of BYU with a finance degree, and dang kid wants to go to work for me, and I'm like, the pie ain't big enough. But we'll figure that out, I guess. We're going to maybe build another place on 120th South. What this is about is, and would it be?
Sure, you can pass something out if you'd like.
Be real quickly.
Thank you.
There's 3 pages here. Page 1 is the Google map. Let's see if I can go on with that. Okay. The overview, that's the land I'm talking about. It's exactly 2 acres. It's behind the shop there, Les Schwab and Dave's Auto. The house there behind the shop is one I own. Then page 2 is a street view. That house, the gentleman that lived in that little house passed away a month ago.
Speaking of the front house,
Yes,
the
sir.
little one in the front?
The one to the left of that you can't kind of see is the one that I raised my family in, and I still own that. But the little one there, directly in the middle of that, the man passed away, Dave Rhodes. He was going to sell it to me for years. He passed away, went into probate. His kids got it, and his kids sold it to a buddy. And I mean, I was like check in hand, and I thought I had the deal, and I didn't. And I'm going to tell you right now, you go see that house has been nothing but a problem for the police chief. And just go talk to him about it, and I'll leave it at that. And the guy that bought the house is not a guy that I want in there, but that's the way it is. And map 3 there is, it just kind of shows the zoning that this is, and I've circled that, is the long, deep lot. It's 750 foot deep and 150 foot wide.
I have a question. So do you own Rhodes' house now, or you didn't get it?
I didn't. I didn't. Dave, he died unexpectedly.
Right.
I was actually out of the country at the time, and I came back, and I just found out, and his kids contacted me and said, we'd love to sell it to you, Dave. And I was like, what's your price? Anyway, then I go to talk to him again. It's like, well, we're going to sell it to this guy. And Dave didn't, I'll just, I really don't want to say anything in open chambers.
That's all I wanted
Okay.
to know was whether or not you owned it.
No, ma'am, but I would if, I should, but anyway. So I wanted to do this. I wanted to do this so openly because I did not want to cause community conflict. I'm going to be in this, somebody's going to be throwing dirt in my face when I'm done with this community. I'm not going anywhere, okay? So, and my boys now are part of this, and, they want to develop, So tell me what y'all would be okay with, because I do not want to go through a Brighton Home thing. I don't want to go through, so that's what I did. I could have called you, Tammy, and then I thought, I don't want to do that because, maybe somebody will think we agreed to something. So this is really the first time anybody here has ever heard of this. And I'm doing that for that reason. I know you can't talk to me about it, but I wanted to put the bug in your ear that I'm looking to do something with that ground. Tell me what you want me to do. Make it easy.
Thank you very much, Dave, for coming and letting us know that of your interest. We appreciate the heads up on that.
And I guess I'll be scheduling a time and we'll start this process.
Thank you very much for letting us know.
So, if I can ask a question? Do you believe you will be acquiring the property that you didn't get? Are you attempting to, or has you just washed your hands of
I'm
it?
going to still attempt to do it because I'd like to razz the house down. I mean, the house is infected with meth. The house should not ever be, the house needs to be bulldozed down. And then, that's why me and my wife moved out of the house next door 10 years ago. It became such, you could smell it was bad. And so that's why, and I've never said that, but my wife finally said, we're moving. And let me tell you, she'll tell you, I'll fight like a mother.
Yes, those probably aren't Lisa's words. Yeah.
Fight. But I wouldn't fight with my wife over that. But I couldn't do anything about it. And so I moved my family out of this community. And I loved living next door to my shop. I love that, man. So I'll try to do it. But I got the check, what they agreed on. But they got other plans for that house, and it ain't something I think that's good.
Thank you very much, David. Appreciate heads up on that. Anyone else who would like to speak during the open session?
My name is Dale McIntyre, and I live in Centerville. It is my understanding that neither the Planning Commission nor the City Council is to consider development plans from an applicant when they are considering a request for rezoning. In spite of this, Centerville has a history of allowing rezoning because of specific plans submitted by an applicant. Since these two bodies are not supposed to give consideration to these plans, I am concerned that they are often included in the attachments found at the bottom of the staff backup report. For example, the second attachment in the staff backup report for item 3 on tonight's agenda includes a site grading plan, a view from Pages Lane, a view from 300 East, floor plans for units 1 through 6, 3 sheets of elevations, and a photo of the Kestrel Bay townhomes in Farmington. Centerville City Council cannot change zoning in Farmington. That photo is totally irrelevant. As to the other items in the document, they do not all appear to be correctly represent the intended construction. The site grading plan clearly shows that units 5 and 6 extend farther to the east than unit 1. Yet, the view from Pages Lane depicts only units 1 and 2 and the entry from the street to the east of unit 1. This minimizes the impact of this large building on this small property. The view from 300 East depicts only units 1, 2, and 3. This again minimizes the impact. These are my questions. Since the Planning Commission and the City Council are not to consider the planned construction during the rezoning of the property, why does staff include those plans in the documentation? Shouldn't prospective plans be excluded from this documentation? Wouldn't those plans be more appropriate during the discussion of a request for a building permit?
Thank you for your comments, Mr. McIntyre.
Those were questions.
We appreciate your comments.
They were questions.
We appreciate your questions.
Could I have an answer?
If staff desires, this is not a question and answer period.
All right, thank you.
Lisa, if you want to respond, you
my
can.
hearing aids don't work well. Was I hearing sit down and shut up?
No, we appreciate and respect your opinion and your questions.
All right, thank you.
I'm happy to give a quick response if you'd like. It's not that the city is prohibited from looking at documentation that the applicant might supply with a rezone. Staff is always advised against it just because we don't want to create an expectation, because you're just looking at the zoning. You're just looking at rezoning the property, and they might show a pretty picture, but it doesn't mean that's what they have to develop once you rezone it. They could easily sell the property the next day and that type of thing. So it's not that it's prohibited, it's just we don't recommend it because it may or may not be what's going to be constructed, and it often tempts the council to want to add a condition so that they just build that, which we can't do at the zoning level. So I think it's okay to add it to the staff report if that's what the applicant has requested.
Yeah, if I just may add real quick, petitioners have a right to petition, and they often provide those plans. So it's not staff saying these plans are part of the review process. That's why you always see staff saying, hey, this is a zone, think of the bigger picture. But often through the development community and property owners, they like to explain what they're doing with their property. They want to show you what they envision of their plans of their property. And so most often you will see some type of set of plans. And so we provide them because it's their request and it's their petition. They own that request, they own that petition. And there's no ordinance rule that says they can't bring in anything they want to try to plead their cause. Staff just simply tries to remind you there's a difference between what they might be envisioning with their property versus the zone action. So it's a request of the public to generate everything they feel that they need to make their argument of their petition.
Thank you, Corey and Lisa, for that explanation. Appreciate that. Is there anyone else who would like to be heard during the open session? If not, we'll close the open session and move on to the other items on our agenda. Thank you for your feedback and participation. First item is the minutes. We have two sets of minutes to approve. The first is the October 4th work session, and then the regular City Council meeting minutes. Does anyone have any changes or suggestions on the work session for Tuesday, October 4th? Okay, then let's move to the regular City Council meeting minutes of October 4th.
1 second, I'm not quite there. Okay, on page 5, line
3, 2.
Okay, on page 5, it says, Councilwoman Meekum stated she is not comfortable with residential high. She said she believes that the south end of the city has its share of high density with 600, and I said units, not high density units there. I was trying to think quickly as residential medium, residential high. I didn't know how to voice that, so that's why I didn't say high density. I just said units.
So you suggest to strike the word high density out of the minutes?
Right.
In two places there, or just the one?
Yes, between Parish and the west. Yes, there was 2 places that needed to be done.
It also says the west side of Main Street. Did you intend?
And I did not mean, I did say the west side, but I was meaning Main Street. I don't know if I can change that or not. I'm new at this.
Do you really?
Could I just suggest, Robin, maybe a different modification that might avoid the issue? What if you just said she believes the south end of the city has its share of high-density units, period? Would that capture what you were trying to say and not create the issue of whether your 600 was correct or not?
Yeah, that's fine.
Is that something the council would agree with?
Yeah, I think that sounds like it
Yeah, it
include the
actually,
intent.
I believe it is. I've checked with Corey, and when you take Main Street, he got 612 units.
On both sides?
On both
sides of the road, so that's what he said. I did.
Residential medium and residential high. So
But if you want, if they want to take that out, that's fine.
my concern is just that the high-density language might suggest people residential high.
Okay, that's
Well,
fine.
she said that she didn't say high density.
Right, so it would
Just
be appropriate,
units,
so if we're being
600
particular like
units.
that, it would be appropriate to strike high density, but then not appropriate to strike west side if she did actually say it. So I like Steve's solution of
That's
just making
fine.
it a more
That's
general
fine.
summary.
And then when it said, she said she does not want more, I said they do not want more, speaking of the people in the area on the south side.
So what do you suggest the language should be?
Residents. Take out
She
the
said
second
this-
she and say residents.
Residents
The
do not.
residents do not want more.
So can I clarify the sentence before then? Were you okay, Robin, with it saying she said she believes the south end of the city has its share of high-density units,
Yes,
period?
that's fine.
She said, and then the next sentence would be, she said residents do not want more. Does that sound reasonable?
And take out the and, she does not.
No, that's
No,
fine.
just residents.
No, and I do not want to set a precedence. That was me.
That was,
That was fine. It's just that it was,
It
yeah,
was the
because you don't
citizens
have
that
the
don't want-
before, so you don't have what I was talking about. So to make that make sense, it would need to say the residents, or the south residents. Just the residents is fine. The residents said the residents do not want more. Okay?
right. Any other, are you good with that, Katie? Okay. Any other changes to the minutes? If not, I would look for a motion to approve the October 4th work session and the October 4th regular city council as amended meeting minutes.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Next, we have the summary action calendar. There are two items on the summary action calendar. One is a new truck, a 2007 GMC four-wheel drive CR 2500 double cab. And the second...
2017.
2017, or did I?
You said 2007.
Yeah, that would...
Thinking, wow, Randy is frugal.
It's going to be a tough crowd tonight, Paul.
It is. I mean, for me, I would 2007 to be a new car, but for Randy, he. And then the other item on the is to increase the number of youth council members from 20 to 25. Any of these items you have question on or need to take separately?
I do have a question on the purchase of the truck. What is our current rotation schedule on vehicles? Are we 5-year or 7-year replacement?
Well, I would say it's probably at least 7.
Okay.
We trickle down the newer ones. Randy has one that's not that old, but it would trickle down in the organization, and then we'd get rid of an older one, although this trickle down may be used for that new employee. Yeah. Jake, you were the one working on that fleet schedule. What would we say for pickups? I know we've got some pickups in
this
parks,
light
for
duty.
example, that the seasonal employees use that are older than that, but they're only used part of the year, so we...
Yeah, and this one would be considered a light duty, so 7 to 8 years is about the life cycle for the truck.
And are we trying to
replacement
recapture with a
cycle.
sale, or are we just run them until we write farm use on the side and then park
No,
them somewhere?
to recapture, we look at the market data to see when's the time to sell it.
Okay, great.
And whether it's a lemon or not, sometimes it'll be sooner than 7 years, sometimes it'll go a little bit longer, depends.
And obviously, our police cars are on a faster schedule.
Yeah,
than that,
police
given their
cars are
loose
more on like a
4-year schedule.
5-year schedule, because they have more engine wear than the miles represent.
Thanks for the clarification.
Thank you. So I would look for a motion.
I did have a question about the youth council. The change from 20 to 25 members, I think is in the right direction, but how many applicants do we usually turn away?
A lot.
Because I know there are other cities in South Davis County who allow everyone to be on the youth council, but that doesn't necessarily mean they all go on the retreat up
Yeah.
to wherever it is.
I
And I
can't
wonder if that
remember
would be
for
a better-
sure how many we had. I'm thinking we had twice that many
40.
applicants.
Probably applicants. I hear from the parents whose children didn't get selected, but
Well, and it ebbs and flows. It's
It's-
been increasing the last few years. They like this mayor.
Because it seems to me there are plenty of opportunities to have additional youth help. I mean, more hands to fill the Easter eggs wouldn't hurt anybody's feelings, I don't think.
it wouldn't. At
But-
some point, it becomes a challenge to manage and a challenge with the budget that they have. So if the council was interested in increasing the budget and the staff time, then more could be accommodated. I think
So
Lisa
I think
would like
25 would be about
would like to accommodate more, but at some point it becomes a challenge to manage a large number.
All right.
So why go up to 25 from 20?
You want,
So it's confession time for Lisa Summers. She actually has more than 20 now. And the charter allows for alternates. And so in the past, she's had several alternates, and that's how she got over the 20. This time, I guess I need to let her speak for herself if you want her to come back.
How far over are we currently with alternates?
Well-
Because that
well,
goes
well-
to Stephanie's point about, well, 25, is that really 30?
Well,
What's
no,
that?
there aren't alternates this year, is what I understand. Instead, they're all youth council members.
Yeah, in my discussion with Lisa Summers, she wanted to be in compliance, and so she actually came to me and said, I've reviewed the charter and we need to make an amendment on this. And so there may be additional amendments. We've looked at the charter. We haven't amended it since 2009, but we wanted to make this quick fix so that she could be in compliance with the numbers. And if you'd like, I'd be happy to ask her to send you an email or something giving her reasons for this number and whether or not more should be included. I think there have been discussions about that in the past, and just the benefits, because she is the main point person for the youth council.
If there are no more questions, I look for a motion to approve the 2 items on the summary action calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Move to second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Next up, we have a reconsideration of the zoning map amendment, or the rezone related to the Ballin Townhomes project at 323 East Pages Lane. And before we have a staff report, I'll ask Lisa to provide some guidance on reconsideration as a legal option.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. This matter was on your agenda last time on, let's see, was it October 4th that we met? And this was a rezone application to rezone the property from commercial high to residential high. And the city council denied that ordinance and that request for rezone. It was a 3-2 vote. And typically once you take a vote, it's final. But there is one procedural tool in Robert's Rules of Order that allow a governing body to bring back up a matter to reconsider the vote, but it's a 2-step process. So first of all, the body has to decide that this matter should be brought back up, and in order to ensure that we're not always rethinking our decisions, someone that voted in the on the prevailing side of the original motion has to make a motion to reconsider. So a motion to reconsider this matter would have to be made by Council Member Meekum, Ivy, or Ince, because you voted on the prevailing side of the 3 to reject the ordinance. So, and then everybody takes a vote on that by majority vote, and so if the motion to reconsider passes, then essentially what that does is it brings the entire matter back up on the table for the governing body to reconsider. And so you can hear from the applicant at that time if you'd like to give his presentation. His request is for you to reconsider this to an RM zoning rather than an RH. Which in my opinion, you do have the authority to consider that. It is an applicant-driven application, so we don't want you to just consider that on your own, but if the applicant is actually saying, I'm willing to accept RM, you can consider that. Now, just because you vote on the motion to reconsider doesn't mean you have to adopt the ordinance, but it puts it back up on the table for you to reconsider it. And then you would have to make another motion to either approve the ordinance as amended or to reject it again. So if you have any questions on the procedure, but
what about the second? Does it have to be, can it be seconded by anyone, or does it have to be seconded by one of the 3 who originally voted?
It can be seconded by anyone.
Okay, well then I'll make the motion to reconsider.
And I'll second it.
So it's moved and seconded that we reconsider the City Council's previous action regarding denial of the proposed rezone at 323 East Pages Lane. Any further discussion on that motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. So we will now reconsider that decision. So at this time, Lisa, would it be appropriate to have a staff report or hear from the applicant? What's the right process on a reconsideration?
I think at this point it would be helpful to hear from the applicant and his request to rezone it to RM rather than RH.
Great. Mr. Bowling, would you be willing to speak to us with regards to this reconsideration request?
I don't know that I have that much to say. We covered all of the bases a few weeks ago. I think that I have some plans that I think I can accommodate within the RM zone. So I'd hope you consider that we would allow us to move forward with an RM zone. I think it's certainly compatible with the area.
Thank you. Corey, any staff report to add to that? We certainly had a lengthy discussion on this last time. Lisa, is there any?
Well, I did want one comment from Corey, which is, as proposed, is what the applicant wants to do doable under RM? Are there any setback issues? Anything that is I don't want to vote in RM and then suddenly prevent the applicant from doing what they would like to do. So I would like a definitive yes on that prior to a zoning change.
The definitive is, as proposed, no. Now, to give an explanation to that, this goes back to don't count the plans as part of your rezone, but
in theory.
In theory of it is, he would have to meet the density calculations. The 6th unit would move it into potentially conditional use, so there would be standards with that, and the Planning Commission would have to look and see if their mitigation measures or impacts are taken care of, so it doesn't guarantee that. Also, the density calculation is based on whatever the net acreage is, or well, it's a gross, but the half street and the property. I know Mr. Ballin is in discussions with the surrounding property owners, and that may or may not pan out in his discussions, so that may or may not allow the as proposed development. But I think the effort is to try to look at that. But I certainly don't want to hang my hat on that, because there's another property being affected, and we'll have to make an assessment on whether there is room for that other property to give any ground up, if you will, to hit a different calculation number. So
without becoming non-conforming itself,
so
right?
As proposed, the definitive answer is no.
Perfect. I appreciate you letting me put you in that box. But as I was the one who was advocating that it has to be without consideration of the development, I just wanted to make sure that as a council we understood where we were.
Further questions for staff or for the applicant on this reconsideration?
Yeah, I'm confused. Sorry. Are we reconsidering RH?
No, you're reconsidering as if the applicant came before you to request residential medium instead of the residential high rezone. The properties.
If I could comment on that.
Please.
I did put it on the agenda. It's the exact same line item that we had last time, and we had to do that procedurally because this is a motion to reconsider. So I did not want to renotice it or put it out there for RM and confuse people. Right. So it had to be the same, it's the exact same item, only we're asking as part of your consideration of that, you're still considering ordinance number 2016-31, but rather than saying RH throughout, it would say RM.
So procedurally, with the reconsideration, we'd have to take 2016-31 and modify all references to residential high to residential medium on passing.
That's correct, and I've reviewed it, and I think that most of them in your motion, you could just say changing all references to RH to RM or residential high to residential medium, but you will want to look at your findings, and finding 3, which I think would still be relevant. Of course, this was drafted to approve, but finding 3 says, according to the Associated Neighborhood Plan, amending the zoning map for this location to residential medium appears to likely have less of a long-term impact on the surrounding neighborhood than the current zoning of commercial high. And I think that still makes sense in that finding.
Lisa, what about the opportunity or the process for holding a public hearing? It's not noticed as a public hearing, but is it appropriate to have a courtesy public hearing when reconsidering this type of action?
Well, you could. I did not list it as a public hearing because, again, this is just a procedural technicality of bringing this back up. We have had in my opinion, you could have done RM at the last meeting, and most of the comments were on density, but if you want to have a courtesy one, you can, but I did not put that on the agenda for those reasons.
I would suggest a courtesy public hearing unless the council objects to that. If there is anyone here. So with that, I'll go ahead and open a courtesy public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to speak regarding the action to reconsider the zoning requests on 323 East pages for the Balling townhomes? Seeing none, I'll close the courtesy public hearing and turn it to the council for questions or action.
I don't have any questions. The reason I voted the way I did last time is the ambiguousness in the general plan created some conundrums for me that we'll need to address separately. But I'm looking across the body, and I would just say I motion that we adopt 2016-31 with the amendments of all references to residential high be changed to residential medium.
I second that.
It's been moved and seconded that the council adopt ordinance 2016-31 regarding the zone map amendment for the property at 323 East Pages Lane, with all references to residential high changed to residential medium. Further discussion on that? If not, let's do this by roll call vote. Tammy?
Aye.
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 That passes unanimously. That was a lot less painful than last time. Okay, next, we'll see if this next agenda item is as painless. Next up, we have a public hearing scheduled for prohibiting flag lot development, and I'd like to have a staff report to address this before we start.
Mayor, Council, I'm sure you recall, but not too long ago, in the recent past, you made a directive to have the Planning Commission look at the flag lot ordinance, and it was with a specific request for rescinding, revoking, eliminating, I don't know exactly the proper term anymore, but it was basically getting rid of it. So we took that back to the Planning Commission and went through the process of noticing and accomplished that task. If I can take a minute just to describe the differences between the two bodies, staff presented it as your directive, straight up and forward with the directive. And the recommendation from staff to the commission is that we did not want to see the flag lot rescinded or eliminated. And so we presented that as a face value of your directive. The Planning Commission, I think, received that in that manner, but had some further discussion. They did host their hearing. They had quite a debate on it, and they eventually came to, I wouldn't say it's a matching 100%, but they came to agreement that the flag lot ordinance should be a tool to be continued to be used. There was some discussion about modifying and some changes. I did remind them that this was being presented as the directive, so they accepted that. I think you had one dissenting vote from Commissioner Daly on that, but it did receive a majority vote to not support, or at least to keep the flag lot in instead of getting rid of it. There was a little further discussion. I'm trying my best to represent the commission. Chair Hershey indicated he might attend to explain. There was some discussion that they would have preferred that the council would have given them some, the rescinding could have been a part of it, hopefully I'm saying this right, but they would have preferred some options to consider what were your concerns about the flag lot, if there were some specifics, because they had somewhat of a desire to talk about, well, if there's some problems, where can we fix it? And but ultimately, they voted just on the face value of the directive, and I think Chair Hersey indicated that he was interested in attending because, and a couple others expressed that they might, because they would rather you make a choice to send a different directive down, not meaning you're changing your mind, but if there are some specific issues that's generating this idea, they would like a chance to look at that and see if there's some modifications they could recommend before you holistically rescind it at this time. But again, it's up to your choice, it's your directive, so you get to do what you want to do.
Corey, can you speak to the history of flag lots in Centerville? They were, 30 or 25, 30 years ago, my understanding is they were allowed, and then it was taken away for a period of time, and then
came back in like 2011. Was it 11?
Must have done it just for you.
No.
A few others. That was the Roberts or the Fisher family, and now they're coming back. Truth be told, from my perspective, and I'm going to get in trouble on all sides of the matter on this, which I typically seem to do.
Yes.
Flag lots create, they do create uncomfortableness in every city. This is very common. Flag lots come, flag lots go. Flag lots come, flag lots go. So, you know, my position is not to try to sway you to don't get rid of them. I mean, if your choice is to get rid of them. I do honestly believe they'll just be right back. This is just, every city does this. It comes, it goes, it comes, it goes. I think the attempt that's probably what we tried because of this history of the roller coaster ride, we instead, in this ordinance, made them a last resort effort. And that's where I think our flag lot ordinance differs in a lot of jurisdictions. We're not the only one that does that, but we were very disciplined to say, hey, this is where you have no other way to combine the properties, subdivide them in a traditional way, small lot, regular lot. We made it so that even if you bought a great big large lot in Ford Canyon, that's 1.5 acres, because it's in a subdivision, you can't come back and get a flag lot. And so my reasoning on the face value of recommending it to the commission was, I think this is a good tool. It's a last resort tool. I made the reference, if you read the minutes, about Ron Randall and the concept that he's chosen to live a lifestyle for a long time. And now what do you do with his property? Flag lot's not available to him if this is rescinded. He chose to keep his lifestyle instead of sell out to developers, but in a zoning principle, his property's eligible for some density, and this is handcuffing it. Rescinding it is handcuffing that ability. Now, you could say, in my mind, look, yeah, you have 1.5 acres, so we don't want to give you 6 units all tucked back there. I agree that that would be probably a stretch, even though density-wise it theoretically could work. You know, maybe we adjust it so right now the ordinance doesn't
Actually,
have...
just to correct you, that's in an RM zone, so it could be.
Ron Randall's house is in
his home, not his business.
I know.
It's an
it's agricultural.
Oh, it's still agricultural.
Right.
It's a nugget. Okay.
Yeah, it's still agriculture. So, you know, because of that holdout and the constraints of running roads, you probably, and not being able to, you're probably not going to exercise your full density. But I think it's fair that you give him some density. And so, you know, I agree with the commission. If there is room to say, what is the angst, let the commission go back and see if they could come up with some suggestions, and then you can make a final decision. And that was going to be kind of Chair Hershey's pitch, and I hope I covered that adequately.
I have a question. So I thought we had a limit of 2 flag lots. So how would he get 6?
No, he was saying.
I'm just talking about what he's eligible for a density-wise.
But he could only have his lot or his house and then 2 more, potentially 2 more.
When he could be, by theory, the zoning that he didn't sell out to could have got more if he would have sold out to a developer and made it as part of a traditional subdivision. So I think there's this balance from my standpoint. We do have some oversized properties. To me, it is fair to give them some opportunity. If there's an angst about the flag lot ordinance, what are those tweaks? Let the commission address it. Let's see if staff and the commission can make some suggestions for changes or reasonings why or wherefores before you just holistically rescind it. But I say that in defense of the commission and practice, because I honestly believe if you got rid of them today, it'll be just like the Fishers 6 or 7 years from now. And somebody's going to come in and they're going to say, hey, I got an oversized piece of property. I can't put these horses on it anymore. It's going to go to junk. And so we'll be back. I know that may be uncomfortable, but we'll be back to it. So that's my sales pitch for now.
Thank you, Corey. Are there any other questions for staff before we open it for a public hearing on flag lots? Or comments?
Just so that in the summary of the Planning Commission's actions, there was the ABC, et cetera, and both in E and F, at the end of those statements it says, or if deemed necessary, be adjusted. And so I assume that that's to your point, is that they would have liked to actually have the directive to explore possible adjustments. Not necessarily suggesting that now that it's come to the council, we figure out the adjustments, because that wouldn't be appropriate. Let the Planning Commission study it first. Right. Okay, thank you.
So I have strong opinions on this, obviously. You can see my name on the list, and I've heard from a lot of residents in the last few weeks about their opportunity to utilize the land that they own. But let's go ahead and open the public hearing first and hear from those who are here on their opinions about and any information they would like to share on this suggested amendment to prohibit flag lot development, and then I'll share my opinions afterwards. So the public hearing is now open. We'd invite you to come and state your name and city of residence for the record and share with us any information you have on prohibiting flag lot development.
Good evening, council members. My name is Kendall Skinner. I'm kind of new at this, so bear with me. First time in a long while being here. I am a recent, I recently acquired a property here in Centerville, 44-5 South Main. The purpose of buying that lot was more or less for farming and teaching the kids how to work and whatnot. And yet at the same time, as they listed that property, it was advertised as being approved for flag lots. So naturally, in fact, we closed on that today.
Yeah, welcome to the neighborhood.
Thank you. I'm actually a resident of Centerville. I was born and raised here. We live in Fort Canyon, actually, and so we bought it as a second home for the purpose of teaching the kids various work ethic. So it was a fun property. I'm excited about it. But also the opportunity to develop that if needs be down the road and to have the flexibility. I like the word tool, as Corey eloquently used, you know, for further density. You know, it's in an area where everything around it's already developed. And so, you know, to put, it's deemed agricultural as it is. And so the ability to expand and I guess use that for other purposes down the road is kind of what our intent was. I guess my question was, why do away with the flag lot in the first place? I'm not quite understanding that to begin with. It waxes and wanes. I understand that it comes and goes. So I don't understand. I'm new at this. So why do away with it?
Well, we do have some people that talk to us about the fact that if you build in their backyard, they purchase their property assuming that the flag lots weren't allowed at that point in time. And so they assumed that their backyard was what it was, and now you're going to put something up. It could be 35 feet high, depending on the neighborhood. If it's in an older neighborhood where you've got small homes, somebody comes in and puts these huge new homes, dwarfs the homes that are there, shadows the homes that are there.
Sure, sure.
And so people, it's a thing about whether the person that owns the flag lot property has the rights, or all the people around it that assumed it wasn't going to be built on because it wasn't legal at the time.
Yeah.
Didn't, you know, so we have a lot of people where you want to build on that. If you wanted to build on it, we'd probably have 6 or 8 people here that don't want you to build on it because they don't want those homes in their backyards.
That could be a possibility, and there could be 20 that are in favor of, as long as we meet ordinance and meet a code
Right.
that is qualifying to the surrounding residents, right?
Right.
So as long as it doesn't supersede, you know, and
So
dwarf.
but that's the reason we're considering it, is we've
Okay.
had people ask us that they don't want to see these homes built in their backyards.
Got it.
And there'll be more as when the public hearing closes down, you'll hear a bunch of arguments for and against.
I
So
see. Okay.
Get your popcorn, it could be interesting.
Okay. Do you guys want to hear anything else from me? I just it's just fun to be here and hear I guess the crosstalk as to why it makes sense, why it doesn't make sense, and so I have a vested interest in the possibility, and so I guess that's why I wanted to be here and represent. So
Thanks for letting
Thank
us
you.
know.
I hope you don't mind if I come back for more thrills.
Not at all.
I like Corey's comments. There are just some some hardship cases. You know, as the city gets developed out, there are some remnant parcels that are just hard to deal with. And this flag lot option gives some options, you know. I live next to a gentleman that has a flag lot, and he's a wonderful neighbor. And he's got probably the highest A-frame in the city. And I still, I'm happy he's there. It would be much better than having a parcel of land that is unusable, and he's unable to keep up, and we have just continual weeds and that type of atmosphere. So like Corey mentioned, if we meet as a last resort, just don't give them an option, just close the door. Another option, you know I've been working on a plan that's on a busy UDOT road, and because there's flag lot options, we're able to put 3 homes with 1 driveway access onto that UDOT road. And sometimes that's an advantage, and if we don't have the flag lot options, that it wouldn't be an option. So I would recommend that you still leave that, make your ordinance stiff and things like that, so it is a last resort. But there's probably a lot of people approaching retirement, or planning on a little income coming on, they divide their land, and maybe the only way they can do it is with flag lots, and maybe you require them to get their neighbor's agreement on it or something. But at least give them the option still. Thanks.
Thank you, Scott.
Kim Samuelson, Centerville, and I have a vested interest in this as well, as I have a larger lot that could possibly be considered flag lot worthy. So I'd hate to see you close the door on that. I just think that letting people do what they think is best, with some guidance, probably with the last resort thing, that kind of bothers me, because could be that they would like to see it one way and the ordinance wouldn't let them do that. So I would like to see you leave that door open for flag lots. And for those who bought ground thinking that nobody would ever build something on the back on something, that's sad. I'm sorry, but if you don't want anything built on it, buy it and make sure nothing gets on it. That's just the way it isn't your property. So let people do what they can do with their own. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim.
Well, hello, friends. How are you?
It's
kind of weird to be on I had to stand on this side of the dais because I'm so used to that side of the 15 years over there. So this is fun. I'm actually here to represent my father, who could not be here tonight.
And for Katie's sake, the recording secretary's sake,
yes.
Could you state your name for the record?
Oh, yes, that's true. Kathy Stredbeck. I'm going to leave his comments. I live in Farmington. He lives in Centerville on Main Street, 788. He also has a vested interest in flag lot option. He has got a couple acres, very, very limited frontage. Has been looking at this ordinance for a while, so a lot of his comments, just to highlight some of them, are similar to what's already been said. For someone who has been looking at this ordinance, he feels like it's more of a property right takeaway, basically. You're shutting the door on his right as to build and to change his property. When the ordinance was created, he feels like it was more, that's when you really have full discretion to the neighbors, because you're creating that law, you're changing their view of their quality of life, basically, because you're allowing this encroachment. But now that the right has been entitled, is what he feels like, that there should be more of a view on the property right of the property owner, because now you're taking away a right. And the word he used was eminent domain. So that's a little bit frustrating. It's debatable to say on this side of the aspect, when you're rescinding an ordinance, you should be looking at those property rights and that view of, it's debatable that you're taking away those rights from the property owner. I agree with Samuelson. It is hard. You don't want to upset neighbors. But it's true, buy the property. The right that they have purchased is to live in a single-family development. Flag lots fall within a single-family development. They don't, it doesn't change that. I know density is always the issue, always frustrating, but this is a real tight ordinance, the flag lot ordinance, and it really doesn't allow a whole lot, but it does maintain that single-family zone, which is what the neighbors, if you want to have purchased. You know, they want to be in a single-family zone. It doesn't change that. This does not increase the density. Another point he makes is taking away this right or this option really opens the door for what's next. What's the next option? Well, I can mow down my house and I can put in a PDO, or I can put in a higher density development. So if the problem is density, you really should keep this tool, because this is a single-family development tool. And to take that away, you don't have any other options but to look at combining properties, increasing that density, going to a higher standard. He also talks about the animals. Used to be, you know, he kept this property. I was that kid that had to grow up on the farm and had to learn how to work hard. So, but it doesn't stay that way forever. Centerville doesn't allow animals anymore. The properties start to become blight, if you will, harder to keep up. I think that's about it. I hope all of you will read the City Council or the Planning Commission minutes on this. Very well done, Katie, by the way. Kudos to you. So they did a great job of tackling that. I have a little bit of experience with the Planning Commission. They don't do anything halfway. They really do research their standards, and please take into consideration their recommendation.
Thank you, Kathy. Is there anyone else who would like to be heard here at the public hearing?
I just wanted to come see where Kathy worked all these years. My name is John Stredbeck. I live at 258 North in Farmington. I just wanted to echo one point, which is if you, and I realize this is not a right, this is not an entitlement, this is not something that has to be, and I do realize that in years they come and go, but for the most part, in the experience that I've seen, flag lots are very, very few. There's probably, my guess, I didn't even read any of this stuff, so I have no idea, but I would guess there was less than a dozen in the years that they were considered legal or they currently. It does create discomfort for everybody around, but my recommendation is if you're going to make things uncomfortable for somebody, make it the people who don't own, because it should always be difficult to take away perceived or not perceived, you know, actual or perceived property rights. If somebody buys a property and they are within their legal law to do something with that property, whether they did it 30 years ago as a farm or whether they do it today as somebody's closing today, they have the right to do kind of what they bought at the time. And I know things change. Flag lots certainly will come and go like they do in every place, but if you're gonna err on the side of keeping the rights that somebody has at the time that they bought that property, not the rights that somebody has of view of somebody else's property. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else who would like to speak tonight? If not, I'll close the public hearing and turn it to the council for discussion. There's one thing that's constant about land use, especially in Centerville, and that's nobody wants to be told what to do on their property. They want to do what they want on their property. And everybody wants to tell their neighbor what they should and shouldn't do on their neighbor's property. That's the most consistent thing about local government. I heard from a few property owners this past couple of weeks. Bruce Pitt contacted me. He lived for many years up on 1825 next to Don and Hilda Burnham, Kim's neighbors. Had a flag lot, 2 homes up there on a large, these were very large lots, but the only way to develop that was a flag lot however many years ago. I don't know when that was built, probably 80s. And obviously I have personal experience with this. If I had to put in a full-size city street instead of being able to have a flag lot, I'd probably still have a lot of non-conforming buildings, or would have had to do something else in my neighborhood, there's 4 or 5 flag lots up and down Main Street as people have tried to figure out how to deal with their strange shaped lots and especially deep lots. And if you have concerns about it and want to put limitations on it, that's fine. I think it's, in my opinion, it's a good tool to allow people to utilize their property. You heard from a couple of other folks that wrote in. We have a number of large oversized lots, and I think it's fair to give people options on how to improve them. If we don't improve them, then they're going to deteriorate as people get older and they're not able to take care of them. So I think you should consider the alternative. What are the alternatives if there's not a flag lot? Joni Evans, I think, was a decent, it seemed like an option that was useful there to take a property that otherwise might have deteriorated further. So that's my opinion, that they're a useful tool long term. And I'll turn it to the council for discussion. I have not heard the specific complaints from anybody about flag lots. I've heard what might happen if somebody did sometime build. I'm not aware of any complaints for someone where they actually did build and there was a problem with a flag lot, but they may be out there, and maybe you have heard actual, something that was built and then there was a problem, as opposed to what might be a problem if someday somebody built somewhere.
Okay. Are we just jumping into discussion?
Yes, open for discussion.
I'll give
I'd love to hear if there's a concrete example of flag lots causing a problem. One that's, we have many in the city, if there's an example that can be cited.
Well, I'll give a little bit of history and some thoughts that I have on it, and then I will let you know that there absolutely are many examples of flag lots that are very problematic and poorly done. So the issue is that everyone by now should know that I am very open to infill options. And that I know that in reality, we're going to see change, and we're going to have older properties that people don't want to keep as the same use or size that they used to be. I was in support of an ADU ordinance. I felt more comfortable with an ADU ordinance where we were open to tighter controls and the ownership retained with the existing homeowner, and so that gave a level of control as well. The concerns that I've always had with flag lots are the fact that it is such an unusual setup where when we subdivide property, when we create a subdivision, there are a lot of controls as far as expected setbacks, where you've got the front door assumed, it's assumed that the front door is going to be facing the street, so you've got a 25-foot front yard, then you've got a 60-foot right, 50 to 60-foot right-of-way, and then another 25-foot front yard before you hit another front door. So flag lots can be very awkward that way.
I know you've had experience in other cities with this, but is there any example in Centerville where it's a problem?
Right, but I think learning from other cities, and other cities sometimes get experience and have such poor experiences that then that's where they choose to reverse the flag lot ordinance. And so it would be too bad if we had to learn from a poor experience, sort of like waiting for a kid to die before we improve the crosswalks. We don't want that kind of situation.
And that's why we had a lot of consideration when the council adopted
my
this
bottom
before.
line point is that when we visited this on the Planning Commission, I spoke against flag lots in general because I have major concerns. Another concern is that road that homeowner uses becomes a road into a backyard area, right? So there aren't other situations that I can think of where the headlights of the car coming home every night are going into someone's backyard windows. Things like that make it unique. And more problematic than other infill options that I've always been very, very open to. That being said, when we discussed it as a planning commission a few years ago, we were sensitive to those things, and we wanted to make it even a tighter ordinance than as it's written now. So we wrote in increased setbacks for increased heights, things like that. And so I am still open to having a flag lot ordinance if the council feels comfortable having a really nuanced and intricate ordinance. Because of the uniqueness of flag lot situations, I think that it calls for a more stringent and more specific ordinance than we usually might write. So those are my feelings on it. And I think that Corey's point about the fact that if we reverse it now, it'll probably just come back is very valid. And so I would say, I think we have a fantastic planning commission right now. A really smart, thorough group. And so I'd feel really comfortable doing what they've requested and sending it back, saying, hey, these are our concerns. It makes us really uncomfortable. You know, use your minds and let us know what you think you can do to help alleviate those concerns. That didn't happen last time. The Planning Commission did that, but then when it got sent to the council, it got recommended that it just get simplified back down. So that's where the breakdown was, in my opinion.
Anyone else like to speak?
One of the things I'm really concerned with is the height. I mean, if we were to keep them, you know, I looked at a building on a flag lot several years ago, and you had to go to the Board of Adjustments. Not sure that so that people can do it, but that maybe it can be looked at a little bit more as to, you know, I mean, I don't think your flag lot's really affected anyone. You don't have the headlights coming in to your neighbors and things like that. That maybe the Board of Adjustments could look into some of that. My other concern is height. I hate to see, especially in the older part of Centerville, where you've got small homes, that now people are going to go in the backyards and build something that's, you know, way higher, so the people around them have lost all the privacy in their backyards there. You know, I'm really concerned about the height. I don't know if I feel good about 1 or 2 flag lots.
You recognize that on an older property like that, they could bulldoze the home and build the taller home anyway and have the same effect.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be in somebody's backyard. Just like Tammy said.
Sure, you could move your home back. There's no requirement that it has to be set to the front of the lot.
Yeah, you have to have a backyard.
No, but you have to have the same backyards.
Same setback.
Same setbacks
right.
For a flag lot.
But we are inviting the increased likelihood with allowing a flag lot, I think is the point.
Yeah, I mean, that's my concern is with the height, you're ruining it for everyone as far as so maybe we just need to look at the height and have it be something that it has to be an average of the homes around it, or something so that we're not getting these huge, because I mean, we do have a few huge monster homes here in Centerville that are very out of place.
Right. We live in a state where there's a lot of property rights.
Right.
And so people sometimes build things that don't fit in with their.
Right. But I just don't know that we should be doing that. And that's my concern, is the height. You know, I'm kind of where Tammy is. I'm concerned about the streets going into people's backyards. But, you know, I don't think if it went to a Board of Adjustments or something, so it still kept the door open.
I think our job, one of our most important jobs as a council, is to legislate land use so that it's orderly and makes sense. And that's where my discomfort comes from flag lots, is that it is a unique situation. It is, you know, we should provide something that can be done with those lands, but it, to me, can feel very chaotic and not orderly and make sense. So if the Planning Commission can convince us that they can find ways to make it feel more orderly and less possibly very problematic, then I'd be absolutely open to that.
So I share some of the same concerns, and I guess if I look at the summary of the Planning Commission's actions, motion, and vote, item E and F.
If you want to put that up on the screen, please, Jake.
Why don't you read it out loud?
Planning Commission finds that the allowance of flag lots with the regulations that are in place can create compatible building orientation and placement on properties that can temper and mitigate any visual and sometimes physical impacts that are not the expected norm to the typical residential development patterns of today, or if deemed necessary to be adjusted. And then secondly, flag lot regulations can adequately and appropriately address building height relationships to adjacent properties, application of front, side, or rear yard setbacks, use of accessory structures, utility service laterals, fire suppression access and turnarounds, stem or pole use and maintenance, or if deemed necessary, be adjusted. So where are those limitations? Because I've looked for them and can't find them.
The finding is a statement that the ordinance overall accomplishes a lot of those land pattern goals already. So that's the Planning Commission finding. That the flag lot ordinance addresses a significant number of these issues. And we talk about the limitations are how much setback you have to have around the perimeter, what the setback between two flags would be, the stem, the requirement for a hydrant if you exceed the fire distance thing, or distance standards, not thing. So the finding says that most of those controls are in place.
But where are they?
They're in the ordinance, existing ordinance. They're saying no, but given that fact, knowing that you are uncomfortable, they're also saying, and staff is saying, that they can be adjusted if you can identify where your concerns are. So, I heard, just real quick, height is an issue. We can go back and have a discussion with them about height and the different things and talk about, okay, what are the rights of the zone? Do we do it this, increased height, stuff. I heard some visual screening of lights and the car lights going down. So we can go back and adjust that. A lot of the basic infrastructure in the ordinance is in place, but you're saying, I want to rescind. And they're saying, well, most of it's in place. If you can identify some strategic places, we'll adjust it and see if we can come up with something that makes you a little more comfortable. And that's all they're really saying. So the ordinance is already in place. All of the requirements are already in place. We now may have to adjust them. Example is there's a 16-foot perimeter around all sides. That's by square footage greater than a regular lot already. But it is a flag lot. It is a unique situation. So we need to go back with the Planning Commission and say, should we take a look at that?
So pardon my being stupid, help me find the ordinance.
It's in your subdivision ordinance.
It's not attached. It's not attached.
Yeah, but I'm in the ordinances and I can't find it.
Well, the ordinance you're in is the one attached to the meeting?
No,
He's in the actual zoning ordinance.
City website in the ordinance.
I would agree
You're
with
not
Bill.
in the zoning code. You're probably in the zoning code, not the subdivision ordinance. It's not online.
I would agree
Oh,
with,
it's not online? That's
Well, I
right.
shouldn't say that. It's a
Title
PDF.
15 would be online, and so the subdivision ordinance provisions regarding flag lots are in Title 15, Chapter 5, Section 102, and it's
That's right,
really
they're the
far
PDF.
into the end, and it's subsection 9 and 10 at the end of that Section 102. And that should be on your website. It's just not in the searchable one. It's not in the zoning code, but it should be in PDF on the website.
Yeah, that's correct.
I looked for it and couldn't
but
find
Bill,
it.
I would agree with you that the statement by the Planning Commission does make it sound like those things are addressed in the ordinance, and I would say that they're not. That really only the 16-foot setback is the
Well, they
is the
think they're
limitation.
addressed. The issue is how much more needs to be done.
So I agree that those two statements, E and F, are an overstatement of the way they read the ordinance,
Corey, in your opinion,
in my opinion, yeah.
in your professional opinion, what are the reasons that councils have used to remove flag lots? Why are they here one decade and gone the next? I mean, what?
Exactly what you're struggling with.
Just the same issue with
Same
height and
issue
privacy?
that somebody, I mean, we struggle with the issue. Hidden acres.
Mm-hmm.
That was a unique little subdivision that majority of the population wished would have been turned into a cemetery. Because they've enjoyed that space between their developments for a long time. And it is shocking to see something in an area that's been open for so long. you know, my take as a professional is it's shocking anytime you take a piece of land and start building houses on it. So the shock value is a relative, but I do agree with what Daley was trying to say, is because there's a perceived one house lot with a large backyard, and then something pops up in that backyard where if you had 10 acres and a subdivision goes in, that's not as shocking. So that's what cities struggle with. I think another place that they struggle with is flag lots have had a hard time developing your infrastructure, meeting fire codes and so forth, getting your turnarounds, getting your hydrants. Fire officials probably in the 70s were more rigid, and engineers were more rigid because they just wanted to park the truck on the street and fight the fire. As time goes over, cities build out, underutilized land takes place, you'll see fire and engineer folks come up with the solutions to solve those. But I think Bountiful, I don't know officially, but the rumor is they just barely yanked their flag lot ordinance that they've had.
It was yanked in 2011 when we had this conversation.
Okay, so it's over the safety issues, it's over the shock value, it's over, you know, is this really the right pattern we want? And I don't think Centerville's struggle is unique. It's a standard view. And I think that's why staff, when we developed this, made it a last resort issue rather than most cities adopt flag lots. You can just do them whenever. And that gets more problematic because in my view, an original subdivision platted out, exercising all of its density in that configuration is a defined expectation for everybody that bought into that subdivision plat. Likewise, with the meets and bounds, people have that same perception. The difference that I see between a meets and bounds and a subdivision is chasing the actual density allowed by city ordinance. Meets and bounds are usually held in a long time reserve for the enjoyment of the family, but they're usually not even close to the allowed density, but under the zoning. And so now as they begin to decide a different pattern, and now they're landlocked in and there's no ability to get access, the flag lot starts creeping back up as a way to at least semi-equalize. And so, you know, my standpoint is the flag lot ordinance is really good. If you have some specific issues that are making you uncomfortable, it's, in my mind, we can probably wrestle at a lower level trying to come up with solutions with those, bring it to you, and if those solutions are not adequate, you're the legislative body. You get to say, sorry, you didn't do a great job. Goodbye.
So does a flag lot have to be a quarter acre?
No, it doesn't technically have to be a quarter acre.
It's just the setback.
It's pretty hard to get a buildable area without that, but.
Yeah, the issue is it becomes an infill, and my view is when you start approaching a large lot of that size, there's two places to go with it. It's what we call group dwellings. Rather than do a flag lot, you do a group of buildings on a single large piece, or by the time it gets to that large level, it usually can get access or be combined with something else and be traditionally developed. So flag lots really are for the smaller landlocked pieces. But the issue of how much setback, height, screen fencing requirements, you know, we can take a look at, unless you're just absolutely convinced that flag lots are too strange and too onerous to mitigate.
Answering your question, 10 minimum, I found it, thank you.
Oh,
thank
good.
you.
Good.
I was stalling for time for you, Bill.
Thank you.
That was actually a great discussion, thank you.
10,800 square feet. Minimum
Which is a quarter
lot
acre.
size.
So it does have to be a quarter acre.
You asked, does it have to be? There's ways to flex that.
Another difficulty I'll bring up while I'm thinking about it is I definitely would stick tight with the last resort part of the ordinance if we kept it. But that can be very subjective. So one good example on this list of the flag lot being used was on the street right behind me, 300 East. And the existing home is a large home, but it's older and it's farther back in the lot. And so they flag lotted the 2 front lots. And so that was good because they were right on the street. And then it was the existing home that suffered the consequence now of being this strange property, right? But still, even in that situation, we first saw a proposed subdivision.
Yeah, but that wasn't developed under a current flag lot ordinance. It's not approved as a current flag lot ordinance.
The Joan Evans.
Joni Evans.
Oh, the Joni Evans.
I'm talking about Joan Evans.
Oh,
And so what I'm saying
Yes, the
is that
Joni
then
Evans
that
was.
became a strange subjective thing because we saw that it could be developed as a subdivision. But then the property owner just chose not to, and so we allowed the flag lot instead. And in my opinion, the subdivision would have created a more orderly, less chaotic situation.
Well, the flag that's to the north of it was an existing flag.
I know that.
Yeah. The house behind was what was used for the flag stem, and then the 2 new lots out front. And at that time, I think the subjective issues were great. I think that's a good example of a use of land that, you know, others would disagree, but I think it worked actually very well.
I'll admit to not having read the flag lot ordinance, the full thing online recently, and I don't know the extent to which we require fencing, but I have little kids, and the idea of saying we're going to put a driveway where cars go in and out on the side of an existing house when you're trying to tell children, you know, beware of the road, putting a new road in, that just is all sorts of trouble in my head.
Yeah. We can
So
look at the
that's
fencing.
another thing
You also
that I'm
have the
very
issue,
concerned
though,
about.
sometimes the house that exists wants to do a car off that stem instead of a car on the street. And so sometimes the stem is used to access the garages too. But we can look at fencing and buffering and those kind of things if that's a concern and see if we can come up with a solution you're comfortable with.
As Mr. Bowling said, if you're dealing with a UDOT road, they don't like you to have future driveways. So, for example, in my case, the UDOT requirement was you have to share a driveway. But it was simple in my case. The driveway was already there. In the case of Bruce Pitts, they share a driveway. I mean, most flag lots a lot of them are sharing driveways. Not most, but a lot of them are.
Well,
It works well.
I know the Chad Morris one, number 5 here on our list, is the one that has an issue with the driveway.
Yeah, I
So
think it's a
that I've
driveway
heard a
issue. I
lot
think
about.
it's a density issue with that. And as of now, they're most likely abandoned the flag lot because the flag lot required just a single family home on the flag part.
Mhm.
And now he's just going to move forward with a multifamily development. But yeah, that's an issue of screening and so forth.
So, council, you can table this, you could take action on it, you could direct the Planning Commission to gather more info. What would you like to do?
Do you really want to know?
I do.
I'll throw out a motion that we send it back to the Planning Commission and let them see what they come up with to address our concerns.
Can we?
Is there a second to that motion? Motion is to
Move forward.
send this back to the Planning Commission.
Can we talk about it a little bit more for?
Well, sure, but putting a motion on the table is not open.
If somebody wants to second it, then we can discuss that particular option, or we can let it die for lack of a second and then keep discussing. Is there a second to that motion?
Wasn't quite to that point yet.
If not, I'll rule that that motion dies for lack of a second.
I would like to understand the protections that were here, and I did look and could not find it. And maybe I should have called Corey ahead of time, but I didn't have time to do that. That's why I apologize. I look at, where is that? See your note again. 15.5.102 something B, flag lot area requirements. Main building maximum depth. All main buildings constructed shall not exceed a maximum depth of 400 feet to any main building as measured from the associated stem pole frontage intersecting to the public street. I'm sorry, I have a hard time understanding what that's saying, and I'm sure that if someone were to sketch it out for me.
For now, do you want to table it then so you have more time to study it out? Or?
Yeah, I mean, you could have Corey come and bring us and educate us on this, how you've got the the pole or the stem and then the flag in the back. My understanding is that deals with how deep can that road go? Can you have it be a mile long and then a little flag at the end, a little house at the end? No, they're putting some limits on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to.
So if you want to have a work session,
okay, before we do it, okay, but I'd
Yeah.
like to see us do a work session, but can we do it, to coin an evil phrase, can we say no flag lots until we finish talking about it? Can we do go back to what happened last year, do a TZRO on flag lots until we've had the work session and talked about it?
Well, in my opinion, the TZRO is a very limited tool because it doesn't really have to be noticed and there's no public hearing, and so the council has to come up with some
But this has been
compelling,
noticed and-
countervailing public interest. And the opinions out of the Property Rights Ombudsman's office is that it's not really a compelling, countervailing public interest if you're just kind of changing your mind about a policy direction, which is about what this appears to be. So you could maybe repeal it, but again, I guess we've had 5 in the last 4 years, but those are the issues. I see it's problematic from a legal standpoint to just do a TZRO, plus we'd have to have that on the next agenda. You couldn't do it tonight because we haven't put it on the agenda. And I'd be happy to give you my memo on those standards that you'll need.
I think we've heard that one at least once.
Would we want if we held a work session, would we want the work session to be with the Planning Commission so they could more fully understand our concerns as we learn about it, and then have that discussion? And if we decide to send it to them, then they already have a really good feel for where we're at.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, I'd like to throw out just a couple comments on property owner rights and rights of the community. I have a little unique perspective on this. When I was living in Florida, one of my college professors happened to be the very first person in Boca Raton on the Intercoastal to paint his house flamingo pink in the 1950s. And when he did that, he actually had neighbors who showed up with paint in hand to repaint his house. It was the only time he'd ever been threatened with a paintbrush, but they were going to do that. And now you look at the Intercoastal, and it's a color palette that's pretty crazy. So yeah, but that took 50-odd years for that to change. Well, 40. So there are things that can be introduced into a community that can change the character of a community and make it different. And better or worse is the eye of the beholder. In the 1950s, a flamingo pink house was definitely not in the interest of that community. I am very sensitive to the fact that once a right is granted, it seems like a bad thing to take it away. But that happens a lot in terms of rights are granted, rights may be grandfathered, rights may be taken away as the community sees its overall interest. I'm not expressing an opinion one way or another as to, at this point, what is in the best community interest for flag lots. I hear all sides of the argument. I do think that when you do something that's incongruous to the character of a neighborhood or has never been there before, it's just like a living organism, it will react. When you do something to it, you poke it, it will make noise. The question is does the long-lasting impact really change the character? Does it create issues for the property owners? I mean, look at it this way. I know the neighbors next to me are getting older. I love them. They're great people. When they move, I'd like to pick who's going to live in that house next, but I can't. And that's where my rights end and theirs begin. But gosh, it'd be really nice if they had 3.2 kids, believed what I believe, quiet after 10 p.m. and all the things that I would like to have in a neighbor, but I can't guarantee that. So on the other side is balancing out what are the property owner rights. So I think this is a very complicated issue. I'm glad to see that we're not the first council to ever deal with this and that it comes and goes relative to what the community standards are at the time. So I'm definitely in favor of talking about it in a work session. I think if it can be fit into a specific template that will allow great control, balance the community against the property owner, that's fine. I definitely don't want to see properties go and become blighted. I certainly don't want to see that. But I also, the flip side of that argument, and I've heard this several times, and I can see the point is, You've enjoyed your property as a large lot the entire time, and now you're deciding that that doesn't work for you anymore. Your neighbors have been coexisting with you peacefully in that role, and then you want to change it. That's kind of tough. And so I can see where the neighbors have a problem with that, because they did. A lot of them bought their homes with expectations. Hey, there are trees here. There's distance between my neighbor and myself. This is a great property. And even though their property is restricted to their lot, when I bought my property, I definitely looked at the neighbors and said, how well do they upkeep their property? You know, where are the weeds? I made my decision based on what was around me in addition to the property. So I think it's a valid concern.
And to the property rights issue as well, I feel very uncomfortable taking existing value away from a property, but when you buy a large lot just to have land, then there shouldn't be the presumption that that value can so greatly increase, because then you can sell it as a separate lot. So that's a leap, in my opinion, as well.
I would prefer not to take it away, but I would prefer to better understand the protections to the surrounding properties. And I guess I would, with all of that discussion, if I can pick up on Tammy's
It's okay, it's a whole new motion.
motion and say
We ran into this last time. You'll have to do a new motion, because the other one
New
died.
motion.
I would move that we table this issue for the time being tonight, that we, within a short period of time, hopefully, Steve, have a work session with the Planning Commission to better understand the protections that are there. As a result of that discussion, then we can decide how to go forward.
Well, let me quiz you on the timing, because we've got Corey gone next week. Lisa's gone starting this Thursday. Oh, when? Next week.
Next Wednesday.
Well, I don't
Next
see-
Wednesday for 2+ weeks.
That's when we were going to do all of our other activities.
I'm
So-
fine if you have a work session on flag lots while I'm gone.
Yeah, I would.
I think we
And I don't see a rush either. I mean, this ordinance has existed since 2011, and so I think when it fits in, it's fine.
And I would think we could fit this in November.
Yeah.
So let me ask, Corey, you want Lisa there at the work session, or does it matter?
Is this a shared pain kind of thing?
We can do the work session before your next meeting, prior to your regular meeting on November 1st, if you'd like.
We don't have a work
You
session
mean we were
that
going to
night.
have 2 in a row without a work session, and we're regular?
Well, probably not. I'll just bump one of the other subjects that was going to be part of that one to a later work session. If you don't want to wait on this one, we'll schedule it for the next time.
I'd rather do it sooner rather than later, so it doesn't sit around for 6 months.
Well, that's November 1st then, I think. And we'll invite, 5:30, and invite the Planning Commission to join us. Does that sound all right?
Please.
Tuesday, November 1st, 2 weeks from tonight,
Correct.
5:30 p.m. Corey will be ready, right? With
So I
with
think what you're
visuals?
asking for is the first part of that would be an educational portion or a briefing to make sure everybody understands what the elements are in the current ordinance, and then you go into the discussion. Okay,
So is
Corey?
somebody gonna, do we need
So
a second?
so we have a motion on the table to have a work session with the Planning Commission on flag lots on November 2nd.
I'll second that.
Thank you.
So November 1st, thank you. Good thing we got people checking on me. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. We
Okay.
don't usually have land use discussions that are unanimous here. And I'll allow for a courtesy public comment for someone who missed.
Could you come up to the microphone?
missed the
They
public
won't
hearing.
hear you out there in the web. All three of them who were watching tonight.
Had a great couple of hours with some young people, and so I couldn't be here on time, and I apologize for that, but it was fun teaching them about some important things. I just would like to, and I don't know what has been said, but I lived in a flat lot experience, and it was one of the finest experiences I've ever had. The man that I lived next to, I became very, very, very close to with he and his family. And I wouldn't trade that for anything in the world. So they're not all bad. And in fact, some of them are really, really, really good. And my son lives next door to Mayor Cutler. Their children unite and they do marvelous things. Don't throw this thing away with the bathwater. It's too good in many, many cases. And I realize you're looking at all aspects of it. But I would just say be careful with property rights. I think we're losing them. And as you talk through these things, be careful with property rights, because we pay good money for what we buy, and the right to use it ought not be 100% not ours, as sometimes it appears as if it is. So they're good when they're good, and I've had a great experience. And be careful with property rights. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll look forward to November 1st on that. We don't want Corey to rest yet, so the next item on our agenda, number 5, is to discuss the request to update the general plan. The council has received some guidance and opinions from Corey, and I can't remember if Lisa weighed in on this, on what the state law requires. It was all Corey giving his interpretation of what the state law requires when considering general plan updates. And it was, I had forgotten some of the rules around general plan updates, so that was very helpful. But I guess would invite Councilman Ivey and Meekum to express their opinions around general plan, and then invite Corey to participate in terms of if the council wants to update the general plan, which is always a good thing, how do they put a focused effort together, and what's the process to do that?
All right, thank you. As you remember, last time we met, we had a lengthy discussion, and there were a lot of questions about what the general plan did and did not allow, particularly in the south neighborhood, the southeast, is it called? So I would propose that we go ahead and tackle that part that's screaming loudest. And
southeast neighborhood.
The southeast neighborhood.
Plan.
With the idea that we continue from there to the west, which has also screamed loudly.
Southwest.
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 Areas most likely for imminent development, we probably need to give guidance on.
Sooner rather than later. So I was glad to hear
a new
Corey.
request that I was unaware of tonight. So in the Southwest.
Oh. I was glad to hear Corey say that the Planning Commission was really wanting to dig into fixing something, and I think this is a great thing to send to them post-haste so that they remember that they were excited about that.
Would it, Corey, can we ask you to remind us again what the state law says about general plan? What are the steps that have to be followed, and what's discretionary in terms of what can be done?
Well, I'll answer this assuming that the email went out in its generalities to everybody. For the process of a general plan, there's kind of two parts. Let's give you the official part. The official part is the city council can adopt a general plan, well, not can, you are required to adopt a general plan for your city. But you cannot adopt that unless you first create a planning commission, because you're required to have a planning commission, and that the planning commission is the, if you will, the crafter of the initial document, and then makes a recommendation to the council on the crafting of that document as their citizen planner suggestions to you. And then you can carry it through the process. Now, both bodies have to post and have public hearings on it, and those are the elements that you take place. So you're going to give yourself, if you were looking at the notice and a period and assume that there is no policy writing going on, you're automatically 2.5 months out from putting out on your finalization. And again, that's without really the process for crafting the language. That's just the adoption process. What's typically done to craft the language, though, is it is a practice of planning professionals with the city to, in the case of a neighborhood plan, you would, well, the first thing we have to step back is notify the entire world. I even think it might be Washington. Okay, no, it's just the state of Utah. that we are going to consider a general plan change.
That
Because
you're
this
thinking about it.
Yeah,
You
you're
have
thinking
to give
about
a
it.
10-day notice that we're thinking about
This
it.
just
To
if
the
you're thinking
governor or
about
who? Just
A
public,
lot of the
just public
planning
notice?
coordinator for the state and.
Really?
affected-
all your utilities, all your adjacent cities, and.
It's a 10-day notice.
But it's a 10-day notice, so you have to say, I'm
Before we
thinking.
even start writing.
I'm thinking and thinking, think. But once we get past that, to craft the language, what's typically done is a public outreach with the neighborhood. And that can take varied forms. It can take some that space over a few meetings with them. It can be a fast, intensive charrette process, but usually there's a public outreach. And prior to the public outreach, you're usually creating, just to show up the public and say, okay, what do we do? You know, the typical process is to identify those elements that you're looking at from the body of the general plan. Here are the elements that we're talking about: the demographics of the future, the transportation needs. There's some required categories in the body that you have to have. And you're taking that body element and saying, how does this fit in now into your neighborhood plan? And you're taking the macro view and trying to do this mid-level view. Strategic plan is not a great word, but strategic plan for the neighborhood, implementing that greater vision for the city. And you talk about your demographics, you talk about your discoveries and your data and the issues that if the council has some preliminary issues list to talk about, and try to glean from them some type of cohesive, not message yet, but cohesive understanding of what are the issues in their neighborhood. And that's where you start your body of writing. You take those identified issues and you start crafting some draft goals, you start crafting the draft changes, whatever it might be with that. And then there's two routes you can take. The Planning Commission can now spend some time prior to the official hearing process and dialogue about these identified elements, or you can have an ad hoc committee, usually a couple from the commission, a couple from the council, and a couple representatives from the neighborhood, and they talk about these identified general themes and start identifying, here's where we want to craft goals and here's where we want to craft the policy. In the case of an existing plan, you're just going to go over the body of the existing plan and start talking about, is this an issue? What are you thinking of changing? What do you think we ought to do in the future? And start drafting those changes to the plan. If it's an ad hoc committee doing it, those would be presented to the Planning Commission. If it's a Planning Commission doing it, they would get a final draft to take for official notice to the public process and begin that adoption. And that's where I think the body of the work and time takes place, is getting the language either amended or crafted for that specific neighborhood. And what do you think the outreach process ought to be for that community? Ad hoc committees, just the Planning Commission? Is it a charrette process? Is it segmented into different topics and having multiple meetings with them? And the hardest part of all of that process is getting people interested. In that stakeholder realm, your biggest effort is trying to get some participation so that you can start crafting those general ideas as part of their, as they're a stakeholder and participating in it. So it's not necessarily somebody dreaming it up and saying, hey, is this an issue? Hey, is this an issue? So, and that's where your intensive time is working with the neighborhood. I've met in the school auditoriums in the local neighborhood. We've hosted them at City Hall, school auditoriums. We've done charrette processes. We've done it in a segmented way. Charrette processes are the intensive kind of things because people's time is valuable, and so they don't want to come 3 months in a row to meetings. So you kind of hustle it along in an intensive program that might be 1 or 2 nights. One night gathering information, the next night saying this is what we think we heard. Help us correct it.
So Corey, if the council merely wants to clear up inconsistencies and not rewrite the whole general plan, is this still such an intensive exercise? And maybe there wants to be major changes, but if there are a lot of inconsistencies, do those need to be addressed via the same huge process, or can it be done in a more timely manner?
It can be
inconsistencies.
It can be my view of it is to be strategic, you have to already understand what you're trying to accomplish. The inconsistencies for me are always going to be the interpretation, because you have the body that will talk holistically about the city, but may or may not be implemented in a specific neighborhood plan. And that can be perceived as an inconsistency when it may be addressed on the macro level sufficiently. Yeah. And so I think your struggle is who wants to pour through the general plan and interpret what's an inconsistency and what's not. And that's going to take some time.
I think Robin volunteered for that one.
My spare time.
And then if you have a list of, you can now take that list and say, is it really correcting a neighborhood plan where we have to have a charrette process with the folks in the neighborhood? Or is it just so simply there's some editing errors that need to be fixed and we're just looking at it at the macro view? And I think personally, if it's a density-driven issue in Southeast, I think you're a lot longer.
I think you've got both. You've got inconsistencies in language, and then you do, I mean, a charrette process probably would apply. And I think the real challenge is going to be
what is a charrette process? Pardon my stupidity.
It's a process where you bring people together, all the stakeholders get together, and then you talk about what the activity is, and you have a mutually agreed upon, okay,
focal group
kind of pencils down, you're done at this point, this is the deadline we're taking comments to, and then we're going to act. So it's just a process of making sure that you have everybody involved.
Kind of like the tree meeting when nobody showed up?
Kind of like that, yeah.
Participation's always so there's a lot of marketing usually if you're trying to do something like that. You do a lot of pre-marketing to try to build up interest.
So my question is, do we need to have a work meeting where we can kind of talk about the parts that we think there's a problem with, whether we're looking at a big redo or whether it's just little fixes?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, the example that I think you did, the general plan on a macro view, years back with the whole, and this is like, I know it's on YouTube, it's going to be recorded, but I'm going to still say it as quiet as I can, light rail. And the issue that was identified was very specific. Remove all references to light rail in the city's general plan. That was very strategic and was a much simpler process.
So what was that process? Can you remind us what that process was?
It was straight to the Planning Commission and back to the council within the 3 months because it was a specific issue.
There's a directive to remove anything that could ever be possibly construed to refer to
specific language, not necessarily macro planning goals.
Right. It was a specific language. If we want to, I always use that. Is that Utah or is that from Pennsylvania? But I think density and the toleration of density, I think there's going to be a macro and a neighborhood balance discussions, and I think that's longer. Because I do think you have to consider looking at the macro view of the body and what is in place to begin with regarding that issue. And the neighborhood plan will look to say, where in that area can we potentially fulfill that? And if we don't want to fulfill that, or it shouldn't be fulfilled here, then it's the issue of identifying what's happening in that neighborhood that justifies a different direction from implementing that macro view. Because a macro view doesn't have to exist in every single place of the city. Right. But it's always checked against the macro view to say, in this neighborhood, this macro view policy, does it have relevancy in this neighborhood, and where and how it would be accommodated?
I think a work session's a really good idea for a first step, because I think part of this is a misunderstanding about what the general plan is supposed to do for us. I've regularly heard when we're dealing with difficult land use issues that I know that one of the checklist things that we need to ask is this consistent with the general plan? But that is a very, very subjective and flexible standard.
Yes.
And the general plan is in its intention supposed to stay very general. And we have, as the legislative body, a lot of say and flexibility within that. So I think some of the discomfort with the general plan might be allayed as we understand
some of the discomfort I preliminarily perceive, don't I say it's definitive, is that we adopt a general plan by ordinance. And so everybody is looking at the general plan to be explicit about what we're going to do in the decision-making process. That would be a way you could look at it, but that's not really, in my view, a correct way of looking at it. The by ordinance issue is that when you're down in the CUP process, you're allowing the CUP to grab the general plan and also consider the general plan in the CUP process. Yes, it can do it with the rezone too, but a rezone is not an administrative decision. So it's a legislative decision, so it has a much more reasonably debatable. That CUP is administrative, and now you have a tight tie because the site plan, the CUP is saying definitively in this administrative decision, we will look to direction of the general plan. If it's there, it will by ordinance be implemented. A legislative decision doesn't have that tight of a connection. It's not an administrative decision. You look to the general plan for your guidance, but you're not handcuffed by that general plan unless it's so specifically guided and you've just rejected that guidance. Then somebody could make that claim, but I still think it's somewhat of a weak claim because it still really is a legislative decision. What cities will do on a rezone is the general plan's adopted by resolution, and the CUP and site plans are not ordinance connected to it. And it becomes a much looser document for everybody involved when it's a resolution. And so our purpose of ordinance is to tie CUPs and site plans to say if the general plan says something that's not in this regulation, that too is part of the decision-making process. Where the rezone to me is not a place where you're always going to have a definitive direction. And to me, I talked with Robin earlier over the phone, there's wisdom in not getting too specific in the general plan because it can work for you and against you. And you want to be careful in a legislative decision to get something that locks you and then leads to decisions that can be challenged.
And if I could just add to that, there's been a lot of discussion at the legislative level about the impact of general plans. And there's actually a state statute that says the general plan is an advisory guide for land use decisions. So really, in Utah, we're saying, yeah, this is an advisory document, but then it says the impact of which shall be determined by ordinance. And that's where Corey's saying is we have by ordinance reached out to the general plan. But I've heard in a lot of the meetings that I've been in, some land use attorneys saying, hey, how can you do that? Because the zone, as I've said, the zoning, once we've adopted something very specific, that governs. And so, I think the intent is more that the general plan is an advisory document that we look to for future planning. But in Centerville, we have adopted it through our ordinance when making a rezone decision. We say it has to be consistent with the general plan and also through conditional use permits.
Right.
So what about this idea? What if we spent on November 1st, 30 minutes on flag lots to just give us the rundown on what is currently allowed and what the regulations are, and then spent the next hour or 50 minutes on a specific focus on a specific neighborhood. Let's start with the southeast. I think that's a good place to start, and have people read it ahead of time and think about what they would want to change or how they would address
or what's
the
missing
or what's missing, and eating a whole elephant is a big task. But if we could keep the focus very tight, I think that would be wise to start with.
Yeah, and then I think once you identify those issues that you're looking at, you decide whether you want to move into a pre-stakeholder process and invite that system, or do you want to send the definitive themes already and have the Planning Commission host that, and the notices go out to everybody, and use the commission hearing as the stakeholder process? Because they're both stakeholders process, just which one do you prefer the outreach to go to?
So one clarifying question on the 10-day notice that you're thinking about it, to open up your general plan. Do we treat this like surgery? We open it up, we do one thing, we close it back up, or do we just leave it open? Because you're looking at neighborhoods and you're phasing this thing. So do you have to shut it down, or can you phase from, say, the southeast neighborhood over to the west side without necessarily opening up the entire
you could identify what you're doing. Once you complete a process and adopt, in my opinion, to go back into anywhere else is another 10-day notice.
Yeah, and the purpose is, it's not that difficult to meet the 10-day notice of intent, because I think the complaint was that we don't know, and cities are changing their general plan. We need a more systemized noticing, and so it goes to the GIS people and the affected entities, and on the Utah Public Notice website and some other automated sites. But it's not that difficult. The idea is just to say, yeah, we're thinking about amending our southeast, or our neighborhood 1, and you could say our neighborhood 2, but I think you want to be genuine in what you're going to tackle, because it's easy enough for us to just prepare the next 10-day notice when you finish that first neighborhood, and then you move on to the next one. But
the reason behind the question is I would like to avoid general plan fatigue with the community, that it's either always open or it's always under flux, or that you've got one shot, and if you're not here at this meeting, you miss the entire general plan.
And I thought you were worried about staff fatigue on the general plan.
But I sort of think you're better at helping people understand what you're really looking at, because if you're going to put under the microscope neighborhood 1, let people know that. Because if you just say, we're looking at our whole general plan, you know, I don't think you're giving them the whole picture.
Right, and that's why I was saying if I could open it and say over the next 4 months there may be discussions for South, this and the other, because what I do want to avoid is, hey, they closed the general, hey, it's open again, hey, they closed it up, hey, it's open again, because I think that's just going to yank people around more than they would want to be. So I'm just trying to figure out what the balance is from a legal standpoint and from, you know, a community standpoint, because if you do get involved in charrettes with the various neighborhoods, you're going to draw people in from all over the city because they're going to hear the word general plan. But we're really interested in that neighborhood specifically, what they'd like to see for their area, and then the macro as a separate thing.
Yeah, and I agree. If you do that general plan fatigue, particularly in a general format, then you're just noticing everybody always in the general format, and they're saying, hey, what's coming of this? So I agree. I just think when you get into the general plan, you know, right or wrong, it is an archaic document that has been strategically and surgically updated as an as-need basis. So I agree with the point that you're going to find elements as you read it that'll further say, well, what about this and what about this? And I would say your difficult task is separating things that ought to be changed from things that you feel are necessary to be changed, and try to address the more larger factors at a different process and level if you want to move something from A to Z in a short amount of time.
And Mayor, I hate to question your judgment, but do you think you can do both of these in the work session?
Depends if we limit Corey to 2 minutes or less.
I mean, I'm just thinking there's 13 planning commissioners and city council members.
Yeah, it's a challenge, but
you have an hour and 15 minutes realistically.
Well, we could notice it as both. And
how do we start the process? I think it'd be healthy to have a joint conversation so that the Planning Commission can hear the concerns. I'm not sure what the concerns with the general plan are, other than there's a lot of inconsistencies, but I think it would be useful for people to review, and then if the council wants to express some specific concerns before this goes to the Planning Commission to look at the Southeast plan. That might be
I think it's helpful to have both in there, just so that there's a marked starting point. That this didn't go on forever before it was discussed. I mean, even if we don't get to it, at least we put down that, yes, we're trying to get.
So would you describe again then what you expect to happen on the first, in the work session?
I'm leaving that to the mayor.
No more than 30 minutes on flag lots. You think you'll need more than 30 minutes?
I was going to say, what if we put both of them, we do the flag lots, and then if we have time left, we can work on the general plan.
We can always go you know, it's a work session,
I think Paul's
so if we
right.
don't
I
get to it,
think
we don't
maybe
get to
not,
it.
maybe more than 30, but 40 and 40. Steve's right, we won't get a full hour and a half, but 40 and 40, and we,
Because if we think we're going to beat either issue into resolution in 40 minutes, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, you're not going to get either issue. The goal is to try to have some
Right.
discussion, so the planning commission hears the concerns of the
Sure,
council.
sure.
And
And
maybe
with
some
Bill,
time to reaction.
a flyover on both at 40 minutes each seems reasonable, at least to frame what the concerns are.
And then the question is, what's the next step after that? We need some guidance on if we want to tackle updates to the southeast neighborhood. I think the planning commission would want some very specific direction on what the concerns are, and at least that would give them a starting point. Lisa is going to tell us later in our training that you don't have to agree with the planning commission, you just have to send it to them first, and then you can do whatever you want later.
I think we've proven out that we know how to do that part.
Exactly.
Well, I think that's a good starting point.
Yeah.
I really think that will be helpful.
Well, just to give you a positive note, you did, council, not just specific, put the Dix Market area on a goal for redevelopment, and this may or may not lead the direction that they thought of at the time, but in the southeast community, that will be a significant debate, so I look forward to having that debate.
Great.
I think it's worth opening that discussion.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is you're coupling it with another goal.
Yay.
Well, Mayor, you and I and Corey will work on.
He didn't beat us up.
You and I and Corey can work on defining the objectives clearly so that we know
We'll have to
what.
be very, very crisp, and
Yeah.
I like George's
For that work
approach.
session.
This is a flyover. This isn't a
Yeah,
a deep
there's
dive.
no way we're going to hit all the detail on this, but at least if we can mention general items, maybe if there's some text that we can float or something like that, that's helpful. But
It'll force us all to read that section on the southeast neighborhood.
Force us all to finish reading the whole plan.
that's why I want to handle it in small bites. There's not enough caffeine in the world to handle that in one go.
All right. So do you need?
Do we need a motion?
Do you think that discussion? Do we need to notice if we're going to have that discussion with the planning commission? Do we need to start the 10-day notice period?
I can chat with Corey about the intent and
And
whether
if-
we're ready
before
to
you leave
start
this
or
week.
if that's
if
the
so, you
direction
probably-
to start.
Well, if you think that needs a notice to even have that work session, then you probably want a motion from the council now. If you
Well, if
want
you're just
to,
having a work session to discuss it and then directing staff to do something, then we would do the notice later. But yes, if you want to specifically say, we're ready to talk about neighborhood 1, then we probably would provide that.
I think we
notice.
are ready to do that. At least that's from your intent, right?
That is my intention, yes.
Okay.
Okay, I move that we notice that we're going to have a work session on November 1st with the Planning Commission to begin discussion about Neighborhood 1, the southeast quadrant of the city in the general plan.
Okay. And direct staff to provide notice of intent.
Corey,
according to the
can I ask you a
statutes.
question?
is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Have we given you other goals or things to be working on that now all of a sudden I mean, if we're putting out the notice, we're telling the public that we're ready to really move on this. And so I personally feel more comfortable having the work session first and having.
Deciding official thinking later.
And also letting you remind us what our year's goals were, what we've recently told you to do, what you think you can do in what kind of time frame, so that we're not kickstarting the public notice that, here, be aware, but then recognizing and realizing, oh, but we told them to do this
Yeah.
first.
And the language in the statute is before preparing a proposed general plan or comprehensive general plan amendment, we shall give this notice. So really they're saying before you start drafting. And so that's why I'm saying there's some wiggle room.
So
here,
I feel
depending on
much
how you
more
wanna
comfortable
handle it.
not noticing yet, because I think that puts up the antenna, and we're not quite ready for that necessarily.
Well, it depends. I mean, you're going to have early adopters or early complainers or early supporters. I think part of the help in framing it is, from my perspective, I don't want to do it in a vacuum. I don't live in the southeast neighborhood. I live up north. I would prefer, if there are residents who have strong feelings, that they start voicing that early in the process so I have something to frame.
Can I tell you a little bit more about the notice? So the notice tells you who it has to go to, but it also says we have to notice that we're going to do this plan, describe or provide a map of the geographic area that will be affected by the general plan amendment, send by mail or email or other effective means, invite the affected entities to provide information to us concerning the impacts of the proposed general plan, the land uses, et cetera. So I think you do.
This is where state law doesn't make full sense.
Because we haven't done that yet.
Because it actually says also any meetings you plan to have scheduled for it. And that's the difficult process. So what we've done in the past to satisfy is we say, hey, we're going to do this. This is the area we're going to look at. And this is our first meeting. And like the West Side, we noticed every meeting the same way. So we satisfied the 10-day notice, but we couldn't identify every meeting. So we would just repeat that every time we held a meeting that was actually scheduled, to trying to satisfy state law, because you don't know all the meetings that you're going to host.
I mean, George, I couldn't agree with you more that the earlier we get input and involvement, the better. But I'm also speaking to your concern about that wearing them down.
Yeah,
You know?
I think that's the balance, and the problem is the way I hear the state statute. It sounds like you have to have an actionable amendment that you're trying to work with. We don't.
But yet you got to tell them you're thinking about it.
You can't draft it yet.
Yeah, you can't draft it. You got to. I'm going to notice you that I'm thinking about something, but I'm not going to tell you what it is. I mean, that's kind of ridiculous.
That's what I'm saying. We can handle it either way, whatever.
What's your recommendation? The council is clearly thinking about it. We don't know the specific thought yet.
Okay.
Don't know what they want to do.
If you're just talking about, if you're sure that it's neighborhood 1, then we can notice it up and we can glean from that and figure out, provide a map and what's necessary under the statute.
A 10-day notice would have to be by, is that 10 calendar days or working days?
10 calendar days.
Depends on when you start thinking about it.
So that's by this Friday.
That's fine.
That's a lot.
Well, that's good. It's before she leaves on her trip.
I already have a form for it.
I think your big delay will be the holiday season from a logistics standpoint, and your other goals being put on the back burner.
Yeah. Well.
So can we have the work session first to also be able to look at the goals list and the priorities and just make sure that we're. That's what I feel much better.
I don't think you violate the state law, because I know the thinking is the squishy word there. You're not, unless you're prepared to go forward, you're just saying, let's take a look at this and see if we need to do this.
Yeah,
if you determine that you want to do it, now you're thinking about it.
We've already violated state law because we're thinking about it.
Well, we're thinking about it. Let's
there you go.
split hairs here.
Okay,
So
thinking about it.
let's just make a decision and move forward. You
I-
have a
I'm
motion
with the
on the
motion, yeah.
You have a motion on the table,
And it's been seconded.
and it has been seconded. Any further discussion on that motion? Those in favor of the motion, George?
Aye.
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 No.
That passes 4-1. So we'll try to do the overview and
With the notice.
with the notice and the planning commission, and then we'll decide what we're thinking. We're going to start the thinking process, and then let everyone know specifically.
I wish we didn't have to notice the process of thinking. I would like to be more on we have something concrete.
Yeah.
Great, thank you very much.
We'll provide notice of that too.
Right, I know. I'm just saying, but it's pretty fuzzy.
So Lisa, is City of Bountiful for one of the notified parties?
I think all of our,
I'm just curious.
surrounding cities. West, yeah.
Oh, really?
Great. So before we take a break, our loyal employee Dave has been here waiting, excited to tell us about street sweeping. I would like to hear from him, and then let's take a break.
And he waited a lot at the tree open house. and
Yes,
thank
he did.
you.
He was very nice.
Appreciate that.
Oh, thank you. So I know you're all excited to hear about this with everything else going on, and it probably ranks very high.
I'm the one that started this.
I am grateful that it does get brought up. I appreciate the fact that we can bring some of this to the table and have discussion, get your input as well. I have been asked to give a little brief summary about how we manage the street sweeping. I'm over the drainage utility. The budget is separated between the street department and the drainage utility, but I manage both of those just because it really falls under compliance issues for the state MS4 permit. For those that aren't as familiar with that, that's the Municipal Separate Storm Sewer General Permit, which is EPA mandates, Clean Water Act, those kind of items. And so that's where this comes into play.
And that basically the goal is just to keep the storm drain water separate from the sewer and other pollutants.
To keep all, yeah, more so the pollutants from all the storm water. They want somehow to get the water in the lake exactly as pure as when it first fell from the sky. And we are tasked with that challenge, and it's overwhelming to say the least, but you know, we'll keep plugging away and see how we perform. So I have just a few notes. Some of it was in the emails that I believe was in the agenda packet, if you had a chance to go through that. I'll just kind of target those again real briefly. I might have a couple quick soapbox items I'll touch on just to throw nuggets out there. And then I'd love to have any kind of question and invite those as such. So again, the budget for this year is $44,000 between the two departments. This covers the sweeping and the disposal of all the debris collected in these routine sweepings that we perform. This year, I estimate we'll spend about $36,000 on sweeping alone through our service contractor, Jaquetta Sweeping. That'll equate to about 275 to 300 working hours of them in town actively sweeping the streets. They are...
Say that again, how many hours?
We'll get approximately 275 to 300. That being, our rate with them is $109 per hour. And each time they're dispatched to the city, there's a travel expense of $50 each time they enter, each time they come from their home base to our city. That being every day that they're in town, whether long period, short period. We'll spend approximately $3,000 with ACE disposal. The way that we've found to be the most efficient is to contract it. We have a dumpster on site that we're able to put it straight into. Previously, we were dumping it all in an area, and then we would eventually pick it up, try to haul it off. That expended a lot of our man hours. We're still paying for fuel, things of that nature. And then also with the aforementioned MS4 permit, they did not like that. They thought that was a really bad idea and said stop. So we stopped. And with that, we'll also spend about $5,000 of dump fees at Wasatch Integrated Waste, which is really our only option as far as the disposal of this debris. As I mentioned in the packets, we've evolved over the past couple of years. We used to just do a standard 5 citywide sweepings when I began here. It was just basic, set it up, get 5 in and out, no sweat. We've since then modified it a little bit to where we'll do approximately 4 citywide sweepings of different lengths, and then we've also identified problem areas such as dirt roads where they're connecting to asphalt streets, poor drainage areas. We see some of those where you'll have a collection of drain water, which will leave a lot of sediment and debris in the roads there. We also have water leaks that occur, and then also with the recent addition of bike lanes, which is one of my targets, we've had to spend a little bit extra time and effort in maintaining those bike lanes, which has got taken away from some of our funds that we've been able to use for the rest of the city. So just to touch on our ideal schedule, if we were to have a perfect world, which doesn't happen, we'll do an early summer one, which just kind of is in compliance with our EPA regulations. That's just kind of gets us keeping them clean. It is helpful for the city. The residents notice it, they see it happen, and they're pleased with that.
Well, and you've had all that sand or salt that put on the roads over the winter time that you finally can start working on.
Well, and that will fall on our spring one.
That's the spring one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I apologize. Yes. So, so we start with this again. Just kind of the MS4 permit likes us. Our stormwater management plan that we have drawn up states that we'll try to stay in compliance with doing this kind of thing. Number 2 would be a late summer one. This picks up a lot of your grass and debris, dirt, contracts that we can't get to clean up perfectly, homeowners that blow everything in the road. All these different things, we're having to try to help maintain those because of their non-compliance with ordinance. But as we're finding with the ordinance, it's very hard to, first of all, catch them, Second of all is with the level of enforcement and how much time and effort, because there's no time with the current manpower, to be honest, that we can exhaust on trying to chase down somebody blowing grass into the road. So sadly, we end up having to take the brunt of some of that. The third one is going to be in the fall time, which is where we're coming up to now. Our staff currently will supplement this one. We have a very old, unattractive machine that was an old sweeper. They've since modified it to help suck out the gutters of just the leaves and that. It's not effective for anything really outside of that, but it is currently functional to support in those cleanup efforts. Again, this is a difficult one because surrounding cities have contributed, or excuse me, not contributed, encouraged those to contribute to the amount of leaves in the roads. I would argue that this is not something we want to do, not only do the increased cost, but it does go against many of our ordinances that we have in place for stormwater. We want the opposite. We want people to remove those things from the road and be accountable. But again, enforcement is going to be, you catch them. I kind of joke, one oak tree in the town, you see the leaves, you tell him, this is your leaves. He says, no. Is it worth the fight? And I would argue that no, obviously. So that's one that we really struggle with. Lastly being the spring one, which does collect a lot of the dirt and debris that's pushed aside from the snow plows. It also coincides with our spring cleanup. This particular cycle is going to utilize about 35 to 40% of our overall funds for all sweeping activities for the year in and of itself. And it alone will generate about 4 to 5 times the debris of an average citywide sweeping. So with that, it's my other, I know that there's been discussions, and I would encourage those to maybe keep in mind modifications with the spring cleanup, because we are, again, encouraging the breaking of our own ordinance, plus we are inflicting a lot of pain and hard work and expense on ourselves, and I would encourage us to look at the overall value of that.
Of the spring cleanup, you mean?
Yeah.
And so what you were saying,
there's modifications.
what you were saying about the fall is that you're saying some cities encourage a fall cleanup, in essence, where they tell the homeowners they can put leaves in the street and then they'll come suck them up. And you're saying we don't do that?
Right. Our ordinance tells them to not do that. We don't want you to put anything there. Farmington, for example, does encourage them to do that. Farmington also owns their own sweeper. They have the manpower to man a sweeper for those amount of times, and they also lease out another 1 or 2 sweepers and man them for a month or so just to accommodate that.
And Farmington likes trees.
Yes.
I was going to ask, what is the ROI on a street sweeper? How many years of sweeping does it take to afford one?
Well, I can't answer that one specifically, George, but I was manager of a city that had 2 streets.
Our current amount at $44,000 just to pay for a machine.
And that's just to buy it?
That's just to buy a machine. That doesn't cover your maintenance, brushes.
Or operating
time, costs, fuel, all those
time.
expenditures are going to come into play. So yeah, I know that Steve and I have had discussions about that in the past. It's very popular to say own it, but I think that it is wise to maintain what we're doing.
I have a question. Sorry. Sure. I have a question. So we're only using it, we're only sweeping 5 times a year. Obviously, if we had one, we could maybe do it a little more often than that. Would it be possible to go in with 2 or 3 other cities and buy one? So, I mean, if we only need it 5 times a year, I mean, we could rotate through.
I guess that you see some cities do cooperative equipment shares, things like that. I don't know. I've seen success and failures in conversations with different people in that, whether, it's like kids playing with toys, well, he won't give me it. Well, it's his turn. And we can argue about that all day. So I think that there is value in having your own equipment or utilizing your own contractors just to eliminate that, because I think it's very difficult.
So one thing you touched on was the unintended consequence of bike lanes is the need to pay more attention to the debris in that area. What do you anticipate as with recognizing you don't have the current trails map up, what would you anticipate an increase in cost would be to keep the bikers somewhat safe in terms of additional debris removal that's outside of these regular scheduled windows?
Well, a lot of that would really come down to the level of expectations as the people call to complain. You know, I could look at somebody in good conscience and say, you're fine. And I can say this because I'm a biker, so I'm not going to upset a biker.
You might.
You know, and I might, and that's okay too.
Depends on if you're a militant biker or not.
No, a realist biker. You know, I think that there's a lot of value in having the trail systems. I think that the maintenance, you know, we will spend probably 4 to 6 extra trips up and down 4th West. So if you put that into just having them come to maintain 4th West alone, you're looking at about $270 for them to come out, spend their 2-hour minimum, which is about what it would take to complete that every single time. So you're looking at a couple $1,000s, depending on how many bike lanes we choose to adopt. One in particular that I'm not excited about.
On the frontage road?
Main Street.
No, Main Street.
So can you talk about Main Street and Parish Lane for a minute? Are UDOT roads, your opinion of how much sweeping UDOT does versus what we do? I gave UDOT credit for sweeping before. I called Chris Peterson, told him thanks for sweeping Main Street, and it turned out that you had done it, or you'd had our contractor sweep Main Street because UDOT hadn't. Right. Before the tour of Utah.
The tour of Utah, yeah.
What is their schedule, and how much of our money do we spend cleaning up the mess that's there?
As of right now, we spend very little taking care of their roads because I'm trying to avoid them thinking that it's going to be something that we want to continue. I look at Main Street and Parish Lane. I fear the consequence of starting a maintenance plan with them, regularly sweeping them, and then it evolving to, well, perhaps you guys can push snow, which is a huge drain on our facilities that way. And then at what point do they try to encourage us to take over infrastructure with at least 2 well-documented failures in drainage systems alone? I, of course, would want to stay away from that. Not to get too far from...
So how often do they sweep? Do they sweep as often as you do, or more often?
Their schedule is about 3 to 4 times a year. And it's not going to be one that can fluctuate because what UDOT does is they have 1 sweeper and 1 or 2 guys that are qualified to operate the sweeper, and that will cover quite a large geographical area. So they essentially have a sweeper that just rotates through.
For all of Region 1 or something.
So for us to come through and say, we know that you own Main Street, we know you own Parish, and we put in bike lanes, we want you to come 6 extra times a year, their answer will frankly be no. So then we are looking at the fact, do we want to adopt that kind of thing? And I would encourage not to.
Or we can talk to our legislature or talk to, lobby them to do it more often if we feel that they're not doing an adequate job.
And that could be the case.
Or encourage our residents to do that. I mean, do you feel like they do an adequate job on Main Street? Sometimes it's pretty dirty, and other times it seems fine.
It is a high-traffic road. You do have a lot of higher-profile construction vehicles are going to use that. There are times that I feel like they may step it up. We have had success periodically, whether they have it close and they're willing to come by and do a little bit extra, but with their type of scheduling and the amount of equipment that they have, it is very difficult. We've probably swept on it. Over the course of the year, we may only do it twice. Some of that is
with our own contract.
With our contractor.
Main Street.
Correct.
So they'll do it maybe 3 times a year, and then you'll do it another.
We may supplement once or twice.
And how do you make that decision?
If it does start to get a little excessive, I'll talk with their shed operators here. And if it's in the cards to have them come, they'll do the best we can. We do have a great working relationship with them, but they can only do so much. If it's functioning down in Payson, they aren't going to make a special trip in the next couple weeks just to accommodate.
Learn what you want to learn? Anybody else?
Well, obviously, my statement about stopping the sweeping of some of the residential areas in favor of the bike lanes, what you've said doesn't make sense.
I would
Or
try to
maybe not
discourage
stopping,
from,
maybe cutting back on
I would try to discourage some of it. I mean, we do have our compliance issues. We can continue to look, and if we see target areas that maybe don't seem to get as dirty or things like that, we can look at maybe tweaking things a little bit. But I do think that there's other concessions that could help us maintain our standards and maybe even increase, you know, if we do feel passionate about the bike lanes, we do want to add some of them, excuse me, then, you know, like I say, the spring cleanup, I think, is a very valuable spot to start. I know we've had some conversations.
Your concern is the spring cleanup makes a big mess for you, given there's stuff all over, debris all over the streets for a long period of time. And
Yeah, let me comment on that.
You say that, but I've always been quite impressed that when they clean up in front of my house, they're, you know, after they clean up the pile, they're out there with a broom and
they do rake
and
and typically do things like that. But if you look at the broad scope of it, your house, you'll look out, yeah, there's some dirt here. Now we have how many thousand homes that look and say, it's a little bit. And then in the end, you know, we end up hauling off, say, you know, 40 tons of debris.
Frankly, from where I sit, and I'm not trying to throw stone at the garbage collection, but I think there's as much problem comes from garbage collection and stuff that gets dropped as there is from some of the other.
You're talking about people who overstuff the can, aren't you? So
I'm talking about overstuff.
So as it's lifted up, it falls off.
Sure, and people don't bag, and light items, yeah, you get papers and things of that nature, but.
Yeah, it's a combination of all of it, but I almost don't go a week that I don't have to pick up something that got dropped.
Which is absolutely, you know, we do have efforts to try to encourage public outreach, encourage ownership from the residents, but oftentimes it falls on deaf ears. So.
Two comments, Mayor.
Please.
First of all, regarding the spring cleanup, I talked with Dave and Ken Williams a couple of months ago, and I've charged them with evaluating some options to how we're doing it now so that we might reduce that problem he's talking about. So over the next few months, they'll be doing that, and we may be coming to you with a proposal to change the spring cleanup in some way that still gives people a way to get rid of the stuff, but reduces the problems he's talking about. Secondly, a question for you, Dave. Instead of having 4 citywide sweepings, is it realistic, and would we still be able to comply with the MS4 permit if we, perhaps some of our roads only need 3 times a year? Could we make a judgment like that based on what we've learned by sweeping repeatedly the different areas of the city and make some judgment that, hey, these certain neighborhoods we could probably get by with less, and then apply those resources more frequently to the bike lane roads, for example, or to the other troublesome spots? Just a question.
Yeah, and I absolutely think that that's possible. We do have a good relationship with our contractor to where we are trying to be more in tune. Right now we've been able to say, okay, here's the map, we want it done, they check it off. There was a comment that I might touch on real quick about it coming by a couple times in like a 1 week span. After hearing that, I did go back to the contractor, said, you know, okay, we need to kind of stay on top of this. They in fact did credit us a couple hours. They said that they had some training going on with new drivers. You can imagine it's not a long-term occupation for a lot of people driving that. So with that turnover, there was a couple areas, different size streets and that they were utilizing to help with that. So they've since credited us several hours of work in the city to go towards that, just to mention that. But we are trying to work with them to decide where they are, their different locations as they go. I am trying to kind of monitor the amount as they come and dump it in the dumpsters down at the shop, but that is a very tedious and difficult task at times because I can't exactly spend all day waiting for them to pull in. So that is where some of the challenges come in.
All right, thank you very much. Any more questions for Dave before we let him go? It's been a good education.
Thank you. It's
been too easy.
Thanks for the awesome job you do.
No problem at all. Thank you.
We'll wait for our field trip to visit your storm drain system sometime.
Yeah, 7 to 3:30. We'd love to have anybody that wants to come down. Thank you.
All right, thanks. I'd suggest we take a 5-minute break before we power through the rest of the agenda items. All right. Jake, let us know when we're back on. Looks like the red light is on. So we are on number 7, financial report for the 3-month period ending September 30th. Steve, what...
I spent some time talking to Blaine about this today, and I got all kinds of notes to help you understand these reports better, but how much do you really want to learn tonight?
It just takes questions.
I'd be glad to just take questions, if you'd like.
anything that you in particular are concerned about? I mean,
no, there's explanations to the things that seem to be over or under that are, so there's really not anything alarming. It was mostly going to be just educational explanation to you so you would have better understanding of these various funds and where the monies come from and the interrelationship between some of the funds. But
the project on the frontage road that has storm drain or drainage fees.
Okay.
We've got a drainage fund and a storm drain.
Yes, thank you. That is one I was going to explain.
Okay, great. Where are we paying for that project out of?
Well, initially, it's being paid for out of the Drainage Utility Fund, just for tracking all the costs, but it's going to be transferred, the costs will be transferred into the, excuse me, hold on a second. We will ultimately transfer the cost into the storm drain fund. But right now, the costs are being tracked in the Drainage Utility Fund. You really don't see much cost in the Drainage Utility Fund for capital projects at this time. That's on the last page.
Right.
If you look capital expenditures of $4,900, that's probably just some engineering fees associated with that project, because we really, through September, which this covers, we didn't have any payouts to the contractor. But the payouts to the contractor will be recorded there, and then we will transfer the expenses over into the storm drain fund, because that's where we're collecting the...
Right, you've got the $650,000 budget there where we're expecting for capital improvements in storm drain fund.
Yes, you see the drainage fee line in the storm drain fund?
Correct. I was looking at the expenditures. I mean, is that
yes.
Is that the
the
project?
The expenditures, you remember the drainage utility funds fees, we more than doubled them. But we're putting that increase into the storm drain fund, the revenues, to pay for projects so that we can track projects specifically. Right now, though, you don't see any expenditures in that fund because we have been accounting for them in drainage utility, but there will be a transfer, according to Blaine, into this fund, the storm drain fund of the expenditures, where we're collecting the revenues for that purpose. If that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Do you have concern about either the licenses and permits?
On the general fund, the first page?
Yeah, on the first page in the revenues, that's, I guess, the...
Yeah, that's down. For example, last year, in the first quarter, we collected $220,000 in building permit fees because we had the apartments over there. This year, all we have is a few homes in the first 3 months that have been permitted.
But we had cut back the budgeted or the expected amount.
Yes.
And even so, we're still 40% behind where we thought we would be.
You say 40% behind. We're 25% of the year versus this 15%.
Yeah, it's 40% differential.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
So that's what I mean, is it just a timing issue, or are you starting to be concerned?
Can't answer that yet. I don't know. There's some other licenses and permits in there other than just the building permits, but off the top of my head, I can't remember what those are, so I'm sorry I can't answer that precisely. I will tell you that when you go over to the Transportation Fund, that you don't see anything on Class C line. That's the gasoline tax. And the reason for that is because the distribution of gasoline tax in the current fiscal year, as well as the sixth distribution or the last distribution from last fiscal year, are being held at the state by UDOT until this modification is made to the gasoline tax formula that you're aware the League of Cities has been pursuing for the last few months and working out with the counties and the legislature. There'll be a special session of the legislature here yet this fall to approve a bill that reestablishes the allocation between the cities and the counties to what it was supposed to have been. Was understood, and the intent was when the gasoline tax bill was modified a couple of years ago. So that's why you're seeing zero revenues right now on that line. It's delayed. It'll come in, but it'll be delayed.
Any other questions for Steve on the financial report?
I probably ought to point out this, if you look on page 3, the RAP tax fund. You'll see on the RAP tax line for the budget number $442,500. That includes about $77,000 that was actually collected for the last 3 months of last fiscal year, April, May, and June. And the auditors and Blaine agreed that it would just be best to include that as if it was current year revenue on top of the $375,000 that we estimate we'll get in the current year from RAP tax.
Because we didn't have it in
really
last year's budget?
Yeah, there really wasn't a RAP tax fund in last year's budget. Right. So those revenues are being accounted for as if they were in this year. That's why it's $442,000. Let's see what else might be of note. The Perpetual Care Fund, we won't be getting any more revenue from lot sales, from plot sales, burial spaces, because
we're out, huh?
We're out. There's a letter in your box, if you haven't picked it up, from Scott Russin. Or did he email it to you?
No, it was in your box,
yeah. So, yeah, we sold our last space a week or so ago. We'll still get revenues for opening and closing the grave sites, and in connection with that, some perpetual care fees, but no more lot sales.
So after reading that letter or considering it...
Those of us that don't have lots don't get buried here.
Nope.
Yeah.
Unless you want to pay more and buy it from somebody else.
I thought they couldn't sell resale.
You're not supposed to.
So again, before you get it too much off track here, the sanitation fund on the last page, the expenditures really are only showing about 2 months. That's why they're showing understated. There's a delay on getting the third month into this report, so don't let that mislead you. Otherwise, questions? Okay.
Thank you, Steve.
I should comment just briefly on this quarter-to-quarter comparison, first quarter this year compared to first quarter last year, and to the 10 years prior. And Blaine says there's no reason to be alarmed. This is kind of in line with historical averages, with the revenues being over the expenditures for the first quarter, primarily because we don't receive property taxes until starting in November, other than a little bit that comes in earlier, but most of it's November and later. And you have on the expenditure side some usually at the first of the year expenses, annual contracts, some equipment purchases and so forth. And if you're comparing this year first quarter to last year's first quarter, I mentioned just a minute ago that the building permit fees, for example, last year in the first quarter were $220,000, whereas they're only $56,000 this year. Those would explain why there's some difference between this year and last year. Okay.
Thank you, Steve. Mayor's report, we had a successful lunch with the mayor, with the kids last week. Staff is good to help out with that, and the fire and police chiefs seem to really enjoy that and enjoy the interaction with the kids. You probably got an email from ULCT about a free registration for the broadband conference on November 9th, if you'd like to attend that. I wanted to bring that to your attention if you didn't get that email. I wondered if any of you have received any feedback from the newsletter that went out. I had a few people talk to me about the unusual tone of my message on suicide and opioid use. But if you get any feedback from people, I'd like to hear it.
Did you get feedback?
You mean criticism?
No, positive. Oh. People that had family issues with that are concerned about that in our community. It's certainly a scourge that it's hard to know as policymakers what we could do to help with that scourge that's happening, but it's a real problem.
That message for awareness was very good.
And I think you all got the notice on Jeremy Brown getting a couple of great awards, which was good. Yeah. Fire service area reports, the financial reports are there. I don't think there's anything that I wanted to call out. The fire chief is still very much in favor of trying to find a location where you can build a new station instead of remodel the existing one, because you don't want to deal with the issue of not being out of service. But no decisions have been made there. Lastly, I wanted to bring to your attention some good news. Our city manager has been selected as the BYU Alumni of the Year from the School of Public Management, and will be receiving an award November 15th? 19th, 18th.
Whatever Friday is.
I'm sure this is one that you all go to. The School of Public Policy has a big shindig, and they expect a big long speech from Steve. But it's a pretty nice honor to get selected out of all the I don't know how many alumni there are each year, but it's a pretty big school and a pretty big program.
About 3,000 alumni.
So
from that program.
It's a nice honor that they would select Steve for that, for his many years of good service.
Well, I would be in support of an all-expense paid trip to Provo.
I'll even throw in lunch.
Thank you. That's great.
They are providing lunch. But,
I knew it.
Yeah.
Thank you. So is it appropriate that some of us should attempt to come to show support, or is it not really done?
Well, I had the mayor invited. They had me submit a guest list of up to about 20, and I do have brothers and sisters and children and their spouses, so pretty much used up the 20.
Well, know that we'll be there in heart.
But the mayor was invited, and
Did you let your wife come?
the mayor.
yes, unfortunately, I had a pre-scheduled trip out of town, but
The mayor suggested that in his place, former Mayor Russell come, and that invitation's been extended to him. Yeah. If any of you really want to come, I'll bet I could get you in.
I know how rabid a BYU fan that Mayor Russell is, so this was good for him to to practice restraint, as you'll have to do as a judge.
So, I mean, seriously, I weighed with that question. I didn't want you to feel like you were obligated to go. I didn't invite my department heads to go. But if any of you want to go, I could probably get you an invitation. So, leave it like that.
Well, that's a great honor. Congratulations.
Yeah. Yes. It's a neat thing, and Jake, I'd like to have something in the newsletter at some point on that.
Yeah. I didn't know you were going to mention this tonight.
Gotcha.
Probably with a picture. Jake?
And okay, that's all I have for my report. So next is Robin to talk about Trails and Transportation Committee.
Well, Steve took my thunder from the Transportation Committee.
I did.
That they're sure we're going to be getting the gas taxes back, and that was good news. And we did talk about the Christmas tree fund, which
So
is...
can you be more specific about we're going to get the desired allocation changes?
They're gonna do the changes.
So just back to what we expected.
Where we expected in the first place.
But we're missing basically that interim period. We're not going to get reimbursed.
We're not going to get reimbursed, but they have held the last one. So, yeah.
Right. That's correct. So the first, there's a...
No, they withheld the last one, and so we will get it for the last one.
It just worked out.
If I could be a little more precise, I think the gasoline tax went into, the adjustments went into effect January 1 of this year. And so there would have been 3 distributions over that 6-month period from January through June. The first 2 distributions, we don't get the extra. The third
But we get what?
We
get the reduced amount was.
We would get kind of, a reduced amount, which was like, the increase was cut in half, let me put it that way. That's what I'm remembering, Robin. But the third distribution, which would be the 6th distribution of the fiscal year, should reflect the 17%, estimated 17% increase for cities, as was intended by the original bill. And then going forward in this current fiscal year, 17% estimated increase in the gas tax. Now that's gasoline tax, then you have the Proposition 1 money, which is a different issue, which is starting to come in too now.
Well, now the county is taking, I don't know the right thing, but applications for some of that money to give back to the cities. I was a little frustrated because they're going to give back some of it to the transportation too, and I thought they got their fair share. So we should be getting more of that back.
Yeah, I'm a little frustrated with that policy, and my recollection is that they're not even going to take applications until next June.
Oh, is it that far?
They wanted to let the fund build for a significant amount of time before they took applications. But I might be a couple months off on that, but it wasn't anything that was going to benefit us in the immediate fiscal year.
And there's a new something. Have you heard about the Christmas tree something with the state money that we can get? I was going to get more information on it, and they canceled the meeting this month. So our last meeting was
Christmas tree money.
Yeah, and they called it the Christmas tree fund.
Is that where you can get a loan?
No, it was money that you can. I'll have to bring more information on it because it's something we need to be aware of.
Okay.
I think it'd be great if the Davis County Transportation Committee would join most of the mayors in expressing concern about the county's policy on the transportation funds. I know that many of the cities are pushing them to push more of that money back to the cities,
right,
given they have such a small number of roads to maintain.
Yeah.
Do you remember the ratio? You remember the ratio I reported to the council?
Can't remember.
For every lane mile that they have to maintain, they're getting 20 times as much money from Proposition 1 per lane mile as we are getting. So they're 20% of that 1/4% versus our 40% of that 1/4%. They get 20 times more per lane mile than we do.
So frustrating.
Yeah, it is frustrating. And like I said, I was frustrated too when they said, well, UTA could put in for that money too, and I'm like, UTA's getting a big chunk out of that, so, I mean, I'm for UTA, but.
Well, I think that's a good idea to have a coordinated effort to communicate that to the county.
Yeah, they're definitely getting it, but a little more could be a good thing.
Farmington is putting a significant amount of political pressure on them to release some of those to help with the sidewalks and roads around the new high school. and so far unsuccessfully, but we don't have a new city hall controversy. We don't have an assessment controversy.
We're doing quite well. The Trails Committee, I think they did an excellent job on the ribbon cutting ceremony for the bridge. I wish we'd had a few more people there, but I thought it was okay. And
we had a good turnout, really, considering.
Robin did a personal effort there that I hope you all appreciated.
Mm-hmm. They did a great job. I appreciated that, but that was pretty much what we've been working on, and then getting the Trails map passed. So you guys are pretty much aware of what we've been discussing on the Trails Committee right now. Awesome group of guys. So fun.
All right, that it?
Yep.
Okay, great, thanks. Steve, City Manager's report.
I think I attached the letter from UDOT, so you saw that. So we're in a holding pattern on that. Federal funding application, we will be submitting a letter of intent October 27. This is the Wasatch Front Regional Council's annual funding application cycle for federal monies in the 4 different pots: CMAQ, TAP, Surface Transportation, and one other. And we'll be resubmitting the South Frontage Road widening and bike lanes, which we had submitted to UDOT for their TAP money earlier this year, but were unsuccessful. Wasatch Front has a bigger pot of money to work with. We could possibly be eligible for CMAQ as well as TAP money for that project, so we'll resubmit that. We're also intending to submit a letter of intent for the 2 intersections right here on Parrish, Marketplace, and 400 West. We don't know the design of the potential improvements or the cost estimate, because UDOT's still working through that. That is part of that process. I told you we attended a 4-hour meeting a couple of months back. Now they're inviting us back for a 3-hour meeting next week to review their further analysis of the options that were narrowed down on last time. And I'm hoping that they'll have some ideas about it, improving the congestion at those 2 intersections. And
in a more immediate manner.
In a more immediate manner before the interchange project.
That would be nice.
So we won't have by October 27, I won't have information to put in the letter, but I'm still going to submit a letter of intent and mention and hope that UDOT will actually be a promoter of those projects.
Speaking of that intersection coming off the freeway, I would like us to request that Paul do something to try to police that intersection.
Which intersection?
Coming off the freeway, right before you get to Market. Right there, that first
Carl's Jr.?
500 feet.
No, on the
as you come off the,
you mean
the
actually
exit ramp
on the
from the
overpass?
north. Yeah, as you come off the exit ramp from I-15.
Southbound?
Northbound.
Northbound.
That's a really hard place. There's not really a place for an officer to park to be able to.
What is it you want them to do? Try to manage that?
I want them to eliminate the
weaving.
What is it? The
merging.
The bumper cars.
Oh, I don't know what they can do realistically.
The Chinese fire drill.
I don't think.
I mean, it is insane to see someone come off the freeway in the right-hand lane and then try to cut across all the traffic and make a left turn at that first light right there. And it happens multiple times per day.
Yeah, but realistically, I don't think that the police can do anything
No,
about it.
trying to put a police officer there would make it worse, because there's literally nowhere for them to park.
Put him down in the parking lot at, or down at the corner and pick people up as they come around.
Well, and this is one of the intersections that UDOT has become aware of this very problematic, and we might get a more immediate suggestion for a fix than we had thought.
Yeah, let's see what UDOT comes up with in terms of design ideas. You should know that by the next council meeting, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully, if there's no,
at least a progress report as to where they are.
May or not.
Yeah, what they're thinking about a fix for that intersection.
Sidewalk?
Yeah, the sidewalk, this is the 8 sites. Unfortunately, when we had a pre-construction meeting last week with the tree contractor and the sidewalk contractor, the latter part of last week, at least Kevin and Randy did, I wasn't there, but this is the report I get, is that the tree contractor has accepted a big job with the state and is not going to be able to get to the trees for a few weeks, and therefore the concrete guy has said, I'm not going to do this concrete work in winter unless you pay me more. And so Kevin and Randy are both recommending that we not do that work until after the first of the year. It'd be about February or March when the tree guy then would come in and work, and the sidewalk guy would come in after that. Now my concern about that, of course, is we got 8 really bad spots, and so I've talked with Randy, all right, how are we going to kind of prevent the liabilities in the meantime, and we can either barricade those 8 spots, or he suggested maybe an asphalt fill temporarily where the differential is. So I'll pursue that with Randy, and we'll do something that minimizes our liability in the meantime. But there'll be a delay.
Disappointing.
So, know more about sidewalks than I ever wanted to.
So you're going to ask me where do we go next with this whole big issue? Well, don't ask me tonight.
No,
Let me come back another time.
Something that I haven't heard anybody talk about, that Robin has talked about, and her own personal situation about fixing a leveling sidewalk. And as I have been paying much more attention and looking at the yellow stripes around, and I was looking at some today. I haven't heard us talk about lifting sidewalks by drilling and then injecting whatever kind of mud it is underneath. And certainly when it's in the immediate presence of a tree, that may not be a valid method. But I was looking at one that was in the 1.5-inch range in a guy's front yard today that I just right over here behind Dick's. And he had 4 places that were 1.5 inches, no trees within 20 feet, and it would look like it would be right rather than grinding or anything else for that lifting process.
Yeah.
And I don't
That's a
know
note
if
that
that's
came
on
in
you.
the open house. That I made a note of that, and we'll be talking to Randy and Kevin about that idea as well. Yeah. Yeah, and
Because
there's.
I've heard from several individuals, Robin being the first one, that cost-wise, it's very effective.
I had it done at my house just recently.
On your driveway slab?
I had it on the approach going into my driveway. It was this far down in one corner. I was shocked at what they were able to do. And then I had a sidewalk that goes down the side of my house that had really fallen. It had gone like this. It was interesting because the guy said to me, I could tell what happened. The bucket that dug your foundation was wider than the foundation, and so then we had the driveway poured, but that piece settled where the other didn't. And they were able to bring it up. I was very pleased.
Yeah, we'll be looking. We'll look at that. And there's a number of other ideas about accommodating trees and sidewalks together, but literature that I'll distribute to you at some point. But I'm anticipating my next step is to come back, schedule time for the council to have a discussion about where do we go from here with this issue.
That'd be great.
If you'd quit scheduling all these other work sessions.
All right, this is the item that is anything else, Steve?
That's it.
The item we've all been waiting for is Lisa's training on the role of the Planning Commission.
Are we going to do it?
Can we table? I make a motion we table this item.
Do you have a special PowerPoint for us like you usually do?
Well, I have the one that I gave the Planning Commission.
How long are we looking?
I can make it anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes.
Let's hurry up and do it.
Let's just get it done. 5.
Thanks, sounds good to me. Oh, thanks, Jake. Yeah, I gave this training to the Planning Commission the end of September, and I just thought it might be nice to have a similar discussion to the City Council. I think it was a good discussion with the Planning Commission, and I do think that all of us really just want to try and do our jobs the best we can, and helping them understand their role, I think, was really helpful and well received. So I think, as Corey already talked about today, the legislature has said that we have to have a plan.
Excuse me, Lisa, I just have to note that in case you're wondering, we have nobody watching YouTube right now for your presentation.
Okay, great.
So
all right.
but
we always know they
bailed.
can get it later. You just wait. They're going to watch the repeat.
Once they hear about it, then they'll watch the repeat.
That's right. Because it's too late. Anyway, we do have to have a planning commission. And as we talked about, these are the things, and I think this is helpful for some of you to just remember that on legislative decisions, it has to go to the Planning Commission first. So all of these, your general plan, your zoning code, your zoning map, and subdivision, are always going to be a two-step process that first goes to the Planning Commission, and then it comes to the City Council. Those are our legislative decisions. Then we also have some administrative decisions where we've actually said, okay, Planning Commission, you make the decision. And those are, for instance, our CUPs and site plans and things like that. So I built this training around an article that I received from Dave Church through an anonymous source. But anyway, I thought it was a really good article and had fun reading it. And I don't know if you guys know Dave Church, but he's a really funny guy. And sometimes he can say things that are just more blunt than your own city attorney can say. So it was helpful to read through that. But basically, on these two things, he says that it's not uncommon for planning commissions and councils to kind of get crosswise. And it's part of the system, because planning commissions, these are especially on legislative decisions, because the planning commission has to make a recommendation. And they spend a lot of time, and this is right out of his article, is that planning commissions hold many meetings and they become very invested in their recommendation, kind of emotional about it, and then it goes to the council, and the council decides to go to a different direction. Now, in Dave's article, he also says there's no solution to this source of conflict. But then he gives some best practices, and I actually think there are some solutions, because I think one thing is that the Planning Commission, number one, just wants to make sure that they were heard. It's a lot like your public hearings. You just want to say, oh, well, the Planning Commission did a lot of nice work. So maybe it's just making some comments like that, that you do respect the work, which I think you do, and then also maybe on the record giving a little bit more description of why you decided to go a different direction. And I think that on both sides, I think it can be difficult to be in your position and having these recommendations coming up that are in a different direction than you wanted, and in a different direction than you specifically said. But that's part of the process. That, you know, the law has said we want two different bodies. We want this non-elected body, and then we have the elected officials. And I think what you have to do is just maybe get a little bit thicker skin and say, we are the elected officials, we know we get to make the decision, and we're fine with that. And so when the recommendations come up from the Planning Commission, you know, consider them, state on the record the reasons, and thank them, which I think you do, but then also go into a little bit more detail. So I don't know if that helps, but I do think to remember, and the Planning Commission knows, you're the ones that get to make the decision. You have been elected, and I like Dave Church's comment that, you know, planning commissioners, if you want to make policy or you know, because you get so invested in it, then run for office, you know, do the hard work. So the next point where Dave Church mentions that planning commissions and city councils kind of get frustrated with one another is actually on the administrative decisions where the planning commission is making a decision. And sometimes the council may think, well, we didn't really like their decision on that, or, you know, some examples are where the planning commission actually denies it in violation of the ordinances. But I don't think we have that problem. Our planning commission is very good. And so sometimes what I'm seeing is that the city council's frustration is that the planning commission is approving these things that maybe the policymakers don't like, but then it's your job to change the rules. Because the planning commission really is just interpreting, is just applying the rules to these applications. And so if there's some subdivisions that you don't like, they're just applying these rules. Now, let's see if I put, okay, the Planning Commission wanted staff to prepare this and post it on the door of every Planning Commission meeting so everyone can really see how difficult their job is. And I think this was also helpful, is, you know, even the Planning Commission saying, yeah, we're, you know, sometimes we get frustrated because we feel like our hands are tied, but again, that's coming from state law. State law is saying if you don't like the way your ordinances read, or you don't like your subdivision process or something like that, then the policymakers, meaning the city council, have to change the rules. And then the Planning Commission will happily enforce those. So anyway, just a reminder for the Planning Commission was that, you know, if a landowner brings in an application that meets our ordinances, they have to approve it. Now, CUPs are a little bit different animal, and they're sort of a little more problematic, but also under state law, the Planning Commission, and this goes for the City Council too, our legislative body and our Planning Commission cannot impose any requirement on an applicant that's not specifically expressed in state law or city ordinance. This is another one that I have to repeat in our staff meetings. You know, where is it in the ordinance that we can require that? It's not that I'm saying we can't. We just need to write it down and put it in the ordinance. And so you know, that's why we're saying our ordinances also are evolving as we see these holes. And, you know, I try and pay attention in meetings and say, oh, you know, that might be an ordinance amendment that we'll just initiate at a staff level and fix that. But if you see some where you say, oh, we'd like to amend those and close that gap, happy to do it, or happy to add another layer of requirements. And if the application meets the ordinances, it must be approved. If it doesn't meet the ordinances, it must be denied. Regardless of whether or not the Planning Commission thinks the application is a good idea or a bad idea. And I think this is sometimes the council as well, as, you know, you hear about some things that they've approved and doesn't really sit well with the community. And again, it's just something where we need to go in and look at our ordinances rather than blame the Planning Commission. And I think we can also do a better job maybe helping the public understand, not just complaining about our ordinances, because remember, they're your ordinances and you're the ones that have the authority to amend them. So I try to actually say, I mean, we really do have good ordinances. I know you don't, they're difficult to work with. It takes years to, you know, get the lingo and the language, but I do think that we have very good ordinances. And if we can just do better PR with the public, because if you're complaining about them, then certainly the public thinks, oh my gosh, we just have really lousy ordinances in Centerville. No, well, the better way might be to say, you know, we should really look at that policy direction. That's a good policy issue that we should look at. Or, you know, maybe we do need a few more requirements when it comes to subdivision applications. That's what you know, rather than just saying our ordinances lack in some way. And then if the ordinances are ambiguous, they must be interpreted in favor of the landowner. This is a really interesting one because the Land Use Task Force right now is working on a draft amendment that's coming from the developers and the league, and they're trying to say whether the ordinances are ambiguous or not, they must be interpreted in favor of the landowner. So as we're saying, you know, we are getting a lot of pressure from the legislature, taking more and more of local zoning authority to make our own rules and our own decisions, and it's just getting eaten away each year with the legislature. But the developers have very persuasive lobbyists, and they continue to make inroads into our local authority. But this is one that's a significant issue, and I will probably be trying to weigh in with my own opinion, you know, if it's taken away, because certainly if it's ambiguous, but if it's plain language, why should we have to interpret that in favor of the landowner? We're still trying to look at what's in the best interest of the city. So I think that's an interesting one. But, so that's about it. I did go through some of these basic rules for the Planning Commission, and I don't think, let me just see if there's any. I think that was it. I really just wanted to go over those conflicts because I thought it was really helpful to the Planning Commission, and I think hopefully it's helpful for you too, to just remember that you get to make the decisions. And so if it comes up from the Planning Commission, you know, you just have to say thank you, but we're going a different direction. And lots of cities struggle with that, but it doesn't mean that, you know, we have to have that frustration with the Planning Commission. I think having another work session with them and working together is a step in the right direction.
Thank you, Lisa. Always effective, and thanks for your efforts to be concise.
Okay. Yeah, when I started, the mayor always wanted me to keep my training to maybe like 10 or 20 minutes, but I actually really think that's good advice. It's probably about as much as you can take, so that was it.
Especially at 10:30.
Yeah. Well, thanks for letting me do it, because I didn't want to have to.
You don't have to remember in 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
We appreciate your efforts to train us and improve us and keep us all out of trouble, and the other bodies. Item number 12, miscellaneous business. Are there any miscellaneous business that someone wanted to bring up? Okay, I thought.
Oh, I should bring up, there was some comments made last time about the mosquito abatement and what could be done differently. And I did find out that we are bumping up against the limit of what chemicals can be legally sprayed by the EPA each year. So the only way for them to improve the kill would be to dual tank their systems and distribute either chemical on every other spraying operation. And they have ceased operation for the year. So it's about as good as it's going to get unless we do a significant tax increase and allow multiple chemicals to be sprayed. So
I think there would be significant support for that.
I don't think there would be a lot of backlash against that. I do think that Gary Hatch is at the point where he's managing about as much as they want to manage, and it would be a doubling of their operation in a literal sense. And where he's at is its level of diminishing returns. If they get a 90% kill I'm just throwing out a number, $300 per acre, that's not the right number. It's actually a lot cheaper than that. Mm-hmm. But to get that last 10% is going to cost exactly the same as it did for the first 90%. So you just get into a logarithmic progression of how much harder it is to reach zero. And of course, somebody has a broken sprinkler head and you're right back to where you were.
Yeah. What I'm interested to think about, though, is that with the weather trends that we have, where each year is the hottest year, I just imagine that's going to continue, and then this later into the year issue is going to continue to be more and more of a problem. Yeah,
it's problematic for them in two ways. Is that they try and manage a temporary workforce that's generally comprised of students and teachers, so they bump up against not having personnel available, and then with the spraying restrictions where they're reaching their EPA limits, unless they alternate the chemicals, there's not a lot we can do. But you know, I did express concern that we're still getting eaten alive in Centerville, and we'd like more, but I didn't see a lot of support for an increase in funding for that yet.
Okay.
Steve, I don't believe we need a closed meeting.
Not that I know of, no.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Oh, wait.
Don't we have the dwellings report?
We have a Parks and Rec appointment.
We did the Parks and Rec appointment last time, and I do not have a Planning Commission appointment.
Reappointment of the Parks and Rec?
Oh, yes. I apologize for that. We need to reappoint two people or just Melissa?
Melissa's the only one I'm aware of.
So I apologize. We have Melissa Smith has agreed to continue on and service. Usually our policy has been if people are willing to serve 2 terms on a board, we have them serve 2 terms.
And she actually just filled the remainder of a term, I believe, didn't she, Jake? So she just filled a partial term.
Thank you for that reminder. I need a motion to reappoint Melissa Smith to for an additional term on the Parks and Rec Committee.
So moved.
Second.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. I hope to have a Planning Commission approval for you next time.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
We are adjourned. You don't even have to vote on that. Isn't that a great thing?
Look, I want you to look at it, because I haven't seen it.